Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 911 of the news. And yikes, that's not a day you want to live through twice, but it's good to see you all once again. And today we're hearing that the Kerch crossing has been burned down, and it's been hit. And it's spectacular, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, as we have gotten unbelievable news that the Kerch ferry crossing has been completely destroyed as of today in a shocking strike conducted by Ukrainian armed forces near to the area of the small port of Kavkaz. The last railroad ferry that was in operation, ferrying Russian supplies to and from the Crimean Peninsula, was destroyed today in an unbelievable inferno, leaving the Russians with only the Kerch bridge to use from this point forward, and it appears that the Russians are very scared of using that bridge at this point. A major victory for Ukraine, and meanwhile, we also got to hear that a key Russian airfield just outside of Volgograd, by a couple of dozen miles near to the area of Marinovka, suffered unbelievable damage last night. We were able to cover a little bit of the opening of that attack during our show last night as it was happening live on air, but video and picture evidence came out today in massive amounts showing us that this airfield at Marinovka has been almost half destroyed completely, and some aircraft have clearly been lost as well in the resulting explosion and the fires that were starting to rage around the entirety of the airbase. Not only that, but we also got unbelievable news from inside of Kursk that the Russians south of Reka Seym are completely cut off today. This is the biggest news that we've ever seen. We got to see that the Ukrainians were able to hit decisively the pontoon bridges crossing near Glishkovo at the bird bath as well as to the east of the city, and it appears that the Russian brigade south has no way back across the river up north. And not only that, the Ukrainians have rapidly advanced towards Glishkovo today, taking the towns of Komarovka and also the town of Krasnoyarsk, meaning that the Russians also have no land access to the major defensive forces near the area of Koronivo, meaning that this entire brigade is stranded pretty much already in enemy territory, at least as far as they are concerned, meaning that this entire brigade strength unit will now be on the way out as Ukraine continues to drive deeper and deeper into this area and will, of course, eventually destroy the force outright over time. We also got to hear major news, although we don't know much detail about this at the moment, that the 3rd Brigade announced that a major offensive action is now underway within the Kharkiv Oblast. A very big development. We don't really know much about it, but we did hear that an area about 3 miles wide was breached, and it seems as though that there is some decent progress happening wherever this offensive is occurring inside of Kharkiv, either in the Drovchina front or within the Vovchansk front, one or the other. We also got to hear of continued defensive actions happening around Pokrovsk, although the Russians did end up finagling one village out of the entire battle that's occurring in that area today, but it does seem as though Ukrainian defensive efforts are working as hard as they can to try and stop any further offensive efforts from being wildly successful without any major casualties. We have an unbelievable amount of news today. It is, in fact, I would say one of the craziest days we've seen news-wise in quite some time. Like, I'm not even kidding. We've had about 4 major news stories today that if they happen on a standalone day, like, for example, the railroad ferry getting hit or the Russians being cut off in the area of Kursk, that alone would have been a standalone video on this channel. But nevertheless, all 4 of these major events ended up happening on the very same day. It's crazy to see this kind of intensity of action being conducted by the Ukrainians, but it is giving us a very clear idea that the Russians today were severely on the back foot. Probably one of the darkest and most difficult days in Russian military history over this entire month so far. Moving us on into the first and major piece of news that we did get today, before we get to the airfield out here near Volgograd, we were able to see that down near the area of Kerch, there was something very wild that happened today. There are 2 ways to cross the Kerch Strait, and we've talked about this in depth a bit on this channel, but just in case some people are joining us tonight that are brand new, let's make sure to catch up a little bit on the ways that the Kerch Strait is important to the Russians, and there are exactly 2. There is the Kerch Bridge, built by the Russian Federation after the illegal annexation of Crimea back in 2014, that spans the entirety of the Kerch Strait and connects mainland Russia near Taman with the rest of the Crimean Peninsula around the city of Kerch. This bridge is important, but not strategically important in the modern sense, because the Russian Federation's armed forces started to realize that earlier on in the war, the bridge was a very easy target for Ukraine to hit and damage quite severely, meaning that whenever that bridge was hit, the entire supply chain was thrown onto its head, and there was no way to viably supply the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army forces inside of Crimea and inside of Kherson at a consistent rate. And they were always having to rush and scramble to try and find a new way to keep those forces supplied and running. And so then the Russians went to the second option to cross the strait, a very important one at that, the railroad ferries. Most of these railroad ferries had actually been destroyed before today. There were 4 of them in total, and we can actually see one of them right here. This is one of the railroad ferries. I actually believe that this is a specific one that ended up being destroyed today, funnily enough. We'll get to that here in a second, though. But there were 4 of them, and they would go to this area of the port right here, pick up rail cars and drop off others, and then they would ferry those over here to this little port right here, which is the port of Kavkaz. Kavkaz is specifically a road and rail port, meaning that it picks up road vehicles and rail cars and transports them to and from Kavkaz and into the area of Kerch down here on the southern side, where those vehicles are then offloaded and then more are unloaded for the return trip. This is a never-ending operation by the Russian ferry company that operates these vessels. And not only that, the kind of importance that this railroad ferry has is actually more important than the bridge. The railroad ferries, at least statistically, are used a load more than the bridge, pretty much throughout the entirety of the war except for the opening months. A while ago, about a few months ago, out of the 4 railroad ferries that existed, actually, crazily enough, 3 of them were destroyed and sank at their moorings. We understand that the Russians are trying to recover those still at the moment and get them back in the service, but this left only one lone survivor as the only railroad ferry conducting logistical operations back and forth across the strait. And that vessel today was sitting at this very spot right here, where this vessel is right there, on the clip that we saw. And we saw that the Russians were getting it ready to leave, and we were able to see one of the ferries moving around right beforehand, right on the side of the ferry. We can actually see that it was laden, crazily enough, with a load of fuel cars. These fuel cars not only providing fuel for the Russian armed forces and the Russian Air Force and Navy inside of Crimea, but also supplying fuel for the rest of the civilian infrastructure that continues to operate inside of the area.
That ship is packing full of fuel. That's crazy. That's gonna make for some nice fireworks.
Oh, it's gonna make for some incredible fireworks. It's the kind of fireworks you don't see a lot, as this guy keeps clearing his throat. But that's the end of this clip right here, just showing y'all a literal glimpse at the moments before this ferry went from being a ferry to being an artificial reef. We then got to see that a little while later, disaster struck. We don't know exactly what hit, but we can see that from a little distance away, from a vessel that's transiting through the Kerch Strait, massive explosions started to ring out at Kavkaz port, right around where that ship was moored, and we can see those explosions happening right there on film. Then, when we returned back to the, actually, really quickly before I moved back to the port of Kavkaz, we can actually see what the fire looked like from across the strait at a beach in Kursk. Here's a video of the fire as seen from the other side of the Kerch Strait on the motorway that's heading towards the Kerch Bridge.
Do we know if the people piloting the boat got off the thing, or were they stuck?
Oh, we don't really know. That's a good question, actually. I have no idea. But we can see the fire from the from one of the beaches at the city of Kerch right here.
Man, it sucks to be a Russian tourist now. It seems like every day they're witnessing atrocities while they're at their beach vacation.
Dude, they're like, sweet, not only did I get a free trip to beach, but I get to see man-made horrors beyond my comprehension. Very nice. But moving on from that, we did also get to see something else that was very interesting as well. A close-up video from the tug that we had just seen a moment ago that was moving the vessel around the port took this picture, which is clearly showing that the Conroe Trader, the last ferry that was operating on this route, is ablaze. It is being engulfed in flames. The fuel cars that were on board caught fire after the explosion happened and began to eat the vessel alive. From what we understand, the fuel and the heat that this fuel was burning at was so hot that it actually started to warp the steel plating that makes up the hull of this vessel, and water started to flood in, meaning that this vessel actually sank at its moorings, much like the other 3 sister ships that it used to be able to run this route with also went a similar fate several months ago. But we were then able to get this picture as well, showing the fire from another area of Kafka's port. Once again, the entire ship engulfed in flames and going down pretty quickly. And then we got this clip where we could hear some kind of a fire alarm on this vessel going off. I guess the heat was so hot that it set off a fire alarm or some sort of an alert on the vessel. But we can see the fire right there. And we hear Putin calling as he's about to get on the phone and go,
Stop hitting our fuel, Bliat. We're running low. But real quick, I saw a good question from David Tablet from the live chat. He said, was it just the ferry that was hit, or also was the port hit simultaneously as well?
From what we know, we can confirm that the vessel, the Conroe Trader, was hit apparently dead on, and this is what started the fire. We do believe, though, that there may have been another hit that happened, because there was a secondary explosion in one of the clips that we just showed that didn't really look like it came from the Conroe Trader. It looks like it may have come from onshore at one of these larger fuel tanks right over here. We can't verify that for certain, though, because the exact damage reports and pictures that give us a much more detailed look at the port of Kavkaz haven't come out yet, but from what we're largely telling, it does look like there may have been some secondary explosions that happened, but we can't confirm that with certainty because we don't have the right kind of video and picture evidence to be able to back up those claims. So at the moment, we can't really, we can't really do that too well. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. But still, nevertheless, it looks like things didn't go that well. We did get to see one video, though, from the actual port. It looks like someone was inside of one of the port buildings or one of the port facilities, and they were looking out into the harbor. And man, the Conroe Trader, like, I don't think that thing is trading. I think that thing is toasting.
Man, look at that boiler.
Man, look at that toiler. There we go. Flip the camera.
Is that like is that like the sound of like the like train cars imploding or something? What is that like racket?
I don't really know. It could be a load of things. It could be the steel plates on the side of the vessel buckling under the heat. Could be the tank cars cracking and popping in the explosions. It could be anything out there that's cracking and popping like that. But still, this fire was severe, and not only that, it blocks off the entire railroad ferry access, at least for the moment, because the entire thing is on fire. And not only that, not only is it on fire, but it seems as though this ferry is going to be sinking right where it was sitting, right there at the port, meaning that not only are there no more railroad ferries left operational, now the Russians have to try and salvage this thing out of the way, so that way they can try and find a way to eventually get some ships running this route again. But this is something that I cannot understate the severity of. The railroad ferries were the life's blood of the Russian armed forces that were operating in Kherson and Crimea, and a major linchpin of their supply chain that moved from mainland Russia into Crimea. This means that with this last ferry being stricken and taken out of action, the Conroe Trader, we can now see that the last thing left in this area is the Kerch Bridge. If they want to move anything back and forth from Crimea and the Russian mainland, they will either have to use the Kerch Bridge, or they will not be using the Kerch Strait at all anymore as any kind of a supply route. There is another option. If they don't want to hit the Kerch Bridge, or if they don't want to use the Kerch Bridge, they can try and use the land bridge or the land corridor up here within occupied Ukraine, which I'll zoom out and show y'all here on this map. It's this area south of the red line. They can try and use that. We do know that the Russians have built a railroad access in this area that actually does stretch over into the direction of Melitopol, which is usable at this point. But I don't really know if we will be able to see if there's any kind of a viable supply effort done in this area. Most of this supply route is within artillery range. We actually drew it up a long time ago. That's what these kind of like light red and orange lines on the map are, is the supply lines themselves, and trying to show their condition. We've never really changed the colors on these much, to reflect the actual situation, so it really just ends up showing what the supply lines are and where they're at. But from what we understand, most of the supply line, or at least the railroad supply line, is within HIMARS distance. In fact, the railroad would pretty much have to skirt along the coast in between Mariupol and Berdyansk to be out of HIMARS distance, especially for ATACMS. And so for this reason, this corridor here would be a very vulnerable one, even more vulnerable than the Kerch Bridge at the moment, because there is a bit of a game that's being played here by the Russians about keeping their supply lines down here in Kerch. It ensures that the Ukrainians have to use some of their most advanced weapon systems to be able to try and hit into that area and destroy anything. We have to remember that from the closest distance, the Kerch Strait is about 165, 170 miles away, meaning that anything that strikes in this area has to be a pretty advanced weapon with a pretty considerable range. And the Ukrainians do not have a lot of weapons that can end up striking down here. They do have the Storm Shadow and the Scalp EG, and they also have long-range ATACMS, but from what we understand at the moment, permission for the long-range ATACMS to be used against the Kerch Bridge has never really been issued. And so at the moment, if they want to hit the bridge with any kind of missiles, the Storm Shadow and the Scalp EG are really their only options that they have. If they don't use those, they don't really have anything else. They can try and hit it with the Sea Babies, or they could try and hit it with any other kind of explosives, or even load up another 18-wheeler and then drive it across the bridge and blow up the bridge that way. There's many ways to do it. But still, it would take a decent amount of covert actions, or it would take a really advanced and expensive weapon. Unlike the land corridor, where you can really hit that with just about anything within the Ukrainian arsenal. You could hit it with pretty cheap GMLRS rockets from a HIMARS and end up having a pretty high rate of success of either derailing locomotives or completely destroying that corridor, or making sure that it's largely inactive due to the amount of damage that's been inflicted on it. But still, it does seem as though things are not going all too well for the Russians down there, and I'd have to say that it is something that we will probably have to wait and see how the Russians respond. The Russians only have two possible options. Either they can use the Kerch Bridge, or they can use the land corridor. One or the other. We're not entirely sure which, but we will be waiting to see which it ends up actually being. But still, with that, very big news. And also, Matthew, it hit me. I finally was able to read your text right there. That is the case, because this happened the last time that another one of these conventions was going on. So yeah, we were wondering.
There was a lot of hype tonight, by the way, around that whole event. There were some rumors of some a well-known person showing up or something like that. So that's why.
Interesting. That's what we were wondering, because if many of y'all don't know, we usually have like a running metric on what's kind of normal for viewership, and considering that tonight is a massive news night, we were expecting that there was probably going to be a large amount of people here. There is actually an unbelievable amount of people here still, about 9,000 approximately, but as many of y'all know, much like a couple of months back, there's a major political convention going on here in the United States, and usually a lot of people go and watch that stuff when it's on for either side, so we usually see a little bit of a dip in viewership because of that. But that is what it is. I mean, it's a major event, honestly, with how, of course, not talking about politics here, just talking about it neutrally and not picking a side. Going off of how big, not how big, but how crazy this election cycle has been in America, I'm sure a lot of people are just wanting to watch it because it's a high form of entertainment these days. Like, not lying. Like, it's actually insane what's going on out there on both ends, so I'm sure a lot of people are interested in it just for that reason. But anyways, moving on from that, we still love to know that all of y'all are here with us tonight. Like, there's loads of y'all here, funnily enough, and I hope that y'all been enjoying the stream so far. It hasn't been going on for that long, but that actually does make a lot of sense as to why that was happening, because I completely forgot, Matthew, that actually started today, of all days. But moving on from that, and out of the area of the Kerch Strait, it is now time for us to move on a little bit deeper into the Russian Federation. Actually, you know what? While we're hopping in between Kerch and the area around Volgograd, where that airfield was at, let me show y'all what's going on at Proletarsk still. That's not going well. The fires are continuing, and it looks as though the fires are not stopping. They're actually spreading. It looks as though it was actually deleted, that post was. So I'm going to move you all to the other one where we got to see a whole bunch of Russian firefighters end up apparently getting the short end of the stick, because another one of the depots, or another one of the tanks, blew up at the depot today. And from what the camera person said, there was a large amount of firefighters around the area, and they probably ended up getting burned in the blast. But here's the clip.
Ну да, что-то такое, нахуй. Типа мойки.
These firefighters are awfully far back to be fighting this fire. It's kind of interesting.
Oh no, there's a lot of them in there that you can't see right now because these firefighter guys apparently are on standby or something to be moved in, and there's another unit up there that was actually pouring water into this fire. And apparently when the tank exploded, like the guy behind the camera, because there was a translation of what he said in the description below this video on Twitter, he said something like, oh my lord, a lot of guys just got vaporized or something like that. So there was a lot of firefighters out there when it happened. Pretty unfortunate because, you know, Russian firefighters aren't military members or serving, so it's unfortunate to hear that, but still, this is of course the consequence of fighting a war and then ending up losing it like the Russians are, is that things like this can happen. But we can see the fire continuing on. In a second, you're about to see the next tank over here explode. And it looks like it's starting to happen right there.
Сейчас уебет.
And any second now, the tank's about to go completely.
Это у меня
Someone's got the
телефон.
90s Verizon ringtone.
Oh, there we go. There's the tank that went.
Охуеть. А что
Dang.
там запекло?
Dude, that turned into a fire tornado.
That is crazy. You know, they're far away right here where they're filming from, but also at the same time, it's stupid to have them so close to the actual fire itself. They're actually standing right next to the tank because it's not really a mystery that thing's about to blow up because they're blowing up in succession.
Yeah, you know, I don't know. The Russians are really goofy, but this is literally like an inferno in hell. Like, that is crazy to see. Look at that, dude. It literally turned into a fire tornado. I've never seen a fire tornado before.
Там пизда всем пацанам, кто там был, блядь. Там все сгорели нахуй сейчас. Все сгорели нахуй.
It's a wonder that all the tanks didn't go up at once when that single tank ignited.
Yeah, this is crazy. Absolutely nuts. I mean, you see a lot of the firefighting vehicles getting the hell out of there. But that is insane. And we can hear some pops and explosions coming from over there in the fuel farm.
Охереть.
But I mean, that is crazy right there. You don't see explosions like that at fuel depots often. Like, even in this war, we haven't seen fuel explosions of that magnitude. That was insane. It actually was so large it ended up creating a fire tornado for a short while. But moving on out of Proletarsk and on out of what we can kind of, while that is a huge thing going on in Proletarsk, it's almost a sideshow right now, crazily enough, because while that fire has been going on for about 5 to 6 days, it is taking a sidestep to what's happening in Kerch, what happened at the airfield over here at the little town of Marinovka, and also what's happening up in Kharkiv and also in Kursk as well. So kind of a little bit of a side thing, but still pretty wild to see. So moving on from that and on up into the area of Marinovka, we then get to the big news. Some of the biggest news that we got to see. This is an airfield that we can largely count as destroyed at this point. Now, it's half operational, but half of the airfield has been completely destroyed, and it appears that the rest of it is in some states of damage, varying kinds of damage for that matter. This is one of the few airfields within this area of Russia, around the city of Volgograd, and it's called Marinovka. It's named after the village that it's not actually connected to. This is the village it's connected to. It's actually named after Marinovka up here. I don't know why they went with that naming convention, but it is what it is. No real good way to explain it. Beyond that, however, this airfield was trying out something new, and we were able to confirm, doing a larger amount of research before before the stream started tonight, that this airfield was trying out something brand new and revolutionary. And Matthew, what do you think that was?
They were trying not to get their aircraft blown up this time.
Yes, that's actually correct. You actually got that down nail. And they were trying with these. These are soft shelters, or what the Russians called soft shelters. They're made out of tin, corrugated tin, and what they are is they're just these massive hangars that they put the aircraft in, and they pray that if anything attacks the airfield, it won't blow up the aircraft inside of these little hangars. That turned out not to be the case, and we have loads of video and picture evidence to show things were a nightmare at the Marinovka airfield overnight. And so here is our first clip showing the fires continuing on into the day. These fires were burning for 16 hours by the time this was filmed.
So basically, the airplane shelters turned into like big pressure cookers, basically.
Yeah, they turned into like that reflective shielding that you use in the microwave to cook food better. Like it turned into that.
Terrible. Very unfortunate. This guy must have run here from the village with the way he's breathing.
Oh, look, another explosion.
Это серьезная трагедия, ребят. Случилось здесь.
And another one. What the hell is blowing up over there? Like, it's actually, like, blowing up pretty consistently.
И до сих пор они его утюжат, бля.
They're blowing up our planes, блядь. Putin does not have this under control. Where's Putin? We need Putin. Yes, and also I need physical fitness.
Вот такие новости.
Watching this is wearing him out.
He's acting like this is his money going up in flames.
Всё горит, бля. Всё в дыму, бля.
Oh, and there's another explosion.
Взрывается, бля. И до сих пор всё
Oh.
взрывается, бля.
Very nice.
Всё.
Rather than the explosions, it was a rather peaceful day at the airfield.
It was a little overcast though. It wasn't like it was a peaceful day, but it wasn't a beautiful day due to the overcast from the rising smoke.
Очень серьезно.
I think they might need to issue a NOTAM for this one. Ah!
I tell you this, I think they need to put out a weather advisory. Oh!
Also, it's supposed to be Bezos, by the way, in case anybody's confused.
Yeah. Actually, Matthew, you forgot. It's Lord Bezos to you.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. No pee break.
I may not be royalty, but the way I run this business, I'm like a king. Oh! But that's the end of that clip right there. It probably blew out some people's eardrums doing the Bezos laugh. But moving on from that and into our next clip at the airfield, we did get to see more smoke rising from the airfield. This is a very similar clip to the last one. So I'm going to skip past it because it's kind of showing the same thing. But when we actually get to the airfield itself, oh, buddy, was it bad. It was bad. It was horrendous. Everywhere that's black is an area that burned because of the drone attack that happened. It was horrendous.
Dang, they burned everything. They burned the grass. They burned the planes. That place was really scorched, actually. I didn't honestly, like, when we saw this the other night, we saw some preliminary footage of the attack. I did not think it was going to be this large, but that was actually a massive attack.
Man, it was huge. It was incredibly large. Like, we see that grass burned everywhere across this airfield. I mean, more grass was burning here than Hot Dog Man's apartment, which is really an accomplishment.
Oh.
Like, you don't see that much. But we also got to see that not only did the grass burn, which is kind of a side note, we did get to see that there was some serious notable damage at the actual airfield at Marinovka. This area right here. It was completely obliterated. We actually don't know what hit right here in this area, because there was actually a crater created in the tarmac, and a lot of the shelters ended up being completely obliterated, along with this, along with some sort of a motor pool that existed back here just north of the soft shelters that they had set up onto the airfield. The damage was extreme, and we also got to see a close-up here of the damage. We can see that there was an Su-34 inside of that soft shelter, and it looks like there was another one here, because we can see this faint tinge of blue, and all Russian Su-34s, from what we can tell so far, are either painted in a blue tricolor summer camouflage or a grayscale winter camouflage pattern. All of these at this airfield, from what we understand, were painted in the blue summer camo. But nevertheless, it does appear that 2 Su-34s were most likely knocked out. An additional 2 may have been damaged inside of these other 2 soft shelters, but the damage was unbelievably severe. And not only that, the motor pool that was used to supply and help maintain the aircraft at this airbase appears to have been completely destroyed as well, with most of the complex burning to the ground. You can see that over here on the right side of the screen in this picture. But nevertheless, the damage at this airfield also extended on to another area, and I'll be trying to show this one to y'all as best as I can. So this is the area that was most heavily affected. This was the motor pool that ended up being pretty seriously damaged. And then if we move over here, right here, this is also an area that appears to have been completely splattered as well. This one appears to also be near the fuel supply at the airbase. We don't see any visible damage to any of the fuel tanks there, but this little paddock here was also completely destroyed as well at this airfield and suffered serious, if not completely destroying damage in this area. So it seems as though Marinovka Air Base may have been damaged so badly it's actually been knocked out of action for some time. Things are not looking well for the Russians here. We also have an additional backup that we put down here. I'm not going to be showing that one because it just shows the zoomed in areas that were afflicted, again, just on a different tweet, just in case if one of them ended up disappearing. But this damage was pretty freaking severe. This airfield also was a key airfield in the war, as a entire fighter bomber brigade made up of Su-34s was being stationed here when the attack happened. It seems that the Ukrainians are conducting a an air campaign against the Russians with their drones to be able to try and attack any air bases where Su-34 fighter bombers are operating out of. Su-34s are playing a really quiet role in this war that has been underplayed heavily, but they are the aircraft that are dropping the glide bombs that have been giving the Russians a pretty sizable advantage, actually, in the Pokrovsk front, and this is why the Russians have been advancing so easily from Avdiivka and towards Pokrovsk over the past few months, is because these aircraft are continuously dropping these glide bombs onto Ukrainian positions in this area, and is allowing for the Russians to just keep on pushing farther and farther towards Pokrovsk. Here's Avdiivka, just to make sure to put this into perspective for everyone. Here's Avdiivka here. This is how far they've made it so far. And a lot of their progress, from what we can tell, even by the Ukrainian side, this has been admitted, is being made because the Russians are just obliterating Ukrainian defensive positions with massive glide bombs dropped by these Su-34s, and then the Russians make their advance into that breach in the line, and they just keep on making ground in that manner. So destroying the Russians' ability to even get these aircraft off the ground and to get them to where they can actually destroy any Ukrainian positions near Pokrovsk or anywhere else in Ukraine for that matter is top priority. And it looks as though they are certainly starting to take this as a serious threat to Ukrainian strategic posturing inside of Ukraine and also outside of Ukraine, and they are trying to destroy any ability for an Su-34 to be used against Ukraine on in the future, much like we saw the Marinovka airfield just overnight. And the damage appears to be severe, and therefore we're measuring this largely as a success at this moment. But moving on from that, we also did get to hear that Russia is apparently not only having an issue with dropping bombs on Ukraine, they're also having a little bit of issue with having bombs dropped on themselves. And this actually moves us on in a perfect segue up into the area around Kursk, because we got to see that once again, south of the Reka Seym, the Ukrainians appear to have some sort of air superiority in this area, as they are dropping GBU-39s all over the place. This GBU-39 cluster was actually dropped on top of a Russian platoon that was in the area south of the Reka Seym near Glishkovo. We can see the footage of those bombs being dropped right here. Pretty significant damage, and once again, a large amount of these GBU-39s being dropped at a single time on this single platoon. Largely wiping it out.
That's a lot of damage.
I mean,
it's a lot of shock waves too from that, like the very big shock waves.
Man, it really is. It's huge amounts of damage, but once again, it's starting to show, Matthew, interestingly enough, the airspace in this area might just be open for the Ukrainians. There might not be a large amount of air defense here, or really any at all, to measure. And this has started to pose a little bit of a problem in Kursk, because the Russians are starting, a lot like they did in Belgrade, to set up concrete bomb shelters here, much like they were down in Belgrade. Now, I didn't put this on the map today. I think we actually had this on our Twitter, so let me see if I can go find the picture of it really quickly. And so let me scroll on down, and let me scroll down a little bit further, because I know we have it.
It's under our likes tab if you want to see it. It's at the top of that one.
Oh, you're wrong, Matthew. You're wrong. It's on our repost, because I actually think I reposted this earlier today, or you did, one or the other. But here it is. The concrete bomb shelter. Look at this.
Ah, yes. That looks very protective. Does it even have a door on it, though?
No, it's got no door on it, dude. That would cost too much money.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot. You gotta be able to, like, skim a little extra off of it. No door. That goes right to the big man.
Man, I see people wandering past. We can see this person actually going in.
Oh, well, they're just checking out the bomb shelter like it's an attraction.
They're like, wow, cool. And then they just go on their way.
Oh.
All right.
They're apparently scared. They came out like within 5 seconds.
There's probably a gangster or some very questionable stuff happening inside of that thing. And they're like, oh.
Someone got the idea to Slav squat. They thought it was a public restroom. They're like, oh, leaving. I'm leaving now.
Or better yet, Hot Dog Man is in there going, oh, this is my crack room. Get out. Or something like that. They went, whoa, whoa. And then they
Safe
wandered.
space.
Yeah, dude. This is my safe space right here. But we can see everyone kind of looking at it. Like, people are actually checking this thing out a good bit.
If the Russians really knew what was happening, they would see that and realize, oh shit, we're about to have some serious trouble happening in our city here shortly with those showing up.
Man, you would think so, and it does look as though the Russian Federation is getting really concerned that not only are Ukrainian aircraft able to operate fairly freely around the Russian border and drop a large amount of ordnance on the Russians in this direction, it looks as though they're also scared that they could start dropping munitions around Kursk, and they're starting to set up bomb shelters for the folks around there, so that way if that starts to happen, and if that really is a reality, they can maybe run and hide inside of these tiny little shelters that they're starting to set up. But this is starting to make a lot of people wondering, are the Ukrainians about to take the city of Kursk, or are they about to start bombing it? And a lot of people are actually throwing in a lot of opinions on this. About 3,000 of y'all have actually talked about this very topic, and a lot of people have many different opinions. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking? Are they thinking that Ukraine might take Kursk soon? Or are they thinking they're going to just bomb it? Or what are folks thinking about this? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so now that we've seen the doorless concrete bomb shelters showing up in Kursk, that's like a really bad omen of things to come. The question is Ukraine about to take the city of Kursk? About 45% said yes, Ukraine will attempt to take it, while 34% said no, Ukraine still has a very long way to go before they get to Kursk, and 12% said I need more intel on this one. And honestly, I'm very optimistic that Ukraine will start trying to take the city of Kursk very soon. I believe they've already launched some limited attacks on the city, but they're not really full-fledged attacks yet because they're not too close by. But I do think they have a little more ground to cover, a little bit longer of a way to go before they're actually able to try to take the city itself. So it will happen. I think these bomb shelters are showing up pretty far ahead of time of when the attack will actually take place on Kursk, but it's not going to happen within like the next couple of days or something like that. It probably will be a couple of weeks. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that in my opinion, Ukraine probably and I would have to actually maybe disagree a little bit with Matthew here. I think Ukraine actually has a little bit of a ways to go in terms of taking this area. Also, what's interesting, Matthew, I don't know if you've seen this, but for some reason the Lyubomovka axis has reappeared. I don't know why. And honestly, the entire front line is jacked up in this area. Like, I don't know what happened to it, because it was fine. So let me edit this while I'm talking here, because this is going to drive me crazy if I don't. But beyond that, I would have to say that the Ukrainians are probably not going to be able to take the city of Kursk. This is why I was coming down here and needing to change the front line, is to show exactly where the Ukrainians really are. Because right now they're around Bolshoy, Soldatskoy, and it's a pretty good distance away from Kursk at the moment. And I have a feeling that they're not exactly focused on taking a key strategic center like that. They're most likely focusing on taking a large amount of territory instead, with those objectives coming on into the future, if possible. So I would have to say they probably have a good ways to go, and not only that, they would probably have to divert a much larger amount of resources into this area, in terms of manpower, than they have at the moment. Considering that the city is about 400,000 in population, this means that it's a very large city, and a massive urban battle would then ensue because of that. Like, when you look at the city, and knowing that the Ukrainians could try and maneuver around it a good bit, but in the end, they would still have to fight through it, this would be a massive, massive obstacle for the Ukrainians. Hell, the Battle of Bakhmut and the Battle of Avdiivka were fought in cities with a population of less than 75,000. Avdiivka had about 50,000 people living in it. Bakhmut had about 70,000. And those battles on the Russian side, of course, the Russians, of course, are far less trained and far less equipped for those kinds of battles. but it still took them endless months. The Battle of Bakhmut lasted almost for an entire year, and then they were finally able to take a city that, compared to Kursk, is dwarfed. And so I would say they probably have a good ways to go before they actually start to take the city of Kursk, but it looks like the Russians are scared that the Ukrainians may start to bombard the city of Kursk and try and knock out Russian military targets that are staging around the city, or maybe within the city itself, at least in my opinion. And so,
do you think that the Ukrainian forces are actually going to try to take Kursk at all? Because I'm seeing some people say in the live chat that they actually don't think they're going to try to take it. And honestly, in my opinion, I would say they probably are going to attempt to take it. It may or may not be successful because, like the enforcer said, that's going to be a bit of a harder battle. But even at that, though, the forces are not going to be, huge or large or anything like that, because the Russians still have a manpower issue. They can't really get reinforcements back into this area to really protect it the way that it should be protected. So it's going to be a tougher battle, but I don't think that it would be impossible for the Ukrainians to pull off. But I personally think they're going for it. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would say it's not impossible. Surely it's not impossible. The Ukrainians have shown that anything is possible throughout the war. But one thing I will say is that it's going to be fairly difficult. It would be a pretty tough thing to pull off, especially considering that it's a Russian hero city. Just for that fact alone, the Russians probably are not going to give this thing up easy. They would probably start a general mobilization just to keep manpower flooding into this area to stop the Ukrainians from taking it, even if it meant that hundreds of thousands had to die over the course of months or a year trying to hold the city. They would try and hold it. It would be a pretty horrendous battle. I think the Ukrainians could eventually, if they really diverted a lot of resources and effort into this area, they possibly could take the city, but it would be a very long, drawn out, and pretty bloody battle, probably on both sides, to be able to take the city of Kursk, just because of how large it is and how much the Ukrainians would have to spend in terms of effort trying to drive the Russians out of every single block, every single building, and then every single section of the city.
So you think it may be limited to pretty much like long-range attacks on the city, not necessarily trying to take it?
Probably long-range attacks, or if anything, they might end up trying to encircle the city and force a maneuver victory out of this whole thing. Because the Ukrainians, in the end, like we're talking about, they probably will have to fight through it, and that's true. At the same time, though, they don't have to fight through. They could just maneuver around the city. There's not really a lot of ways to do that, though, because most of the major roads in this area actually pass straight through Kursk. So if you want to maneuver around Kursk, you kind of have to push through Kursk anyways. But there is a possible option to where they could try and maneuver around it, threaten the Russians inside the city with encirclement and besiege the city, and then by that means, probably a large amount of these forces would begin to retreat out of the city through fear of being encircled and then destroyed in detail later on. So that's another option. I feel like that one's actually more likely than fighting through the city, because the Ukrainians simply do not have probably the viable amounts of manpower and equipment to be able to divert into such a major battle as the Battle of Kursk. No battle, I just want to put this out there for everyone, no battle except for the Battle of Mariupol has been conducted at a city this large, like around a city like this or through a city like this. The only reason that the Russians were able to successfully take the city of Mariupol way back in the day, which has a population of about 500,000, so it's actually larger than Kursk, is because the Ukrainians were taken so off guard. There wasn't a large force present in this area, and not only that, once the Russians encircled it, there was no way for the Ukrainians to resupply or reinforce the forces, the limited number that were inside the city of Mariupol. And even still, it took the Russians about 4 months to take the entire city, even with just about 2 or 3 operational Ukrainian brigades inside it. Now, think about that. That was only 3 brigades in Mariupol. The Russians had, I believe, 16 brigades at a single time involved in the battle at its peak, and it took 4 months. Now, imagine if that was the case with the Ukrainians having, say, 6 brigades like we're seeing right now, going up against 6 brigades inside of Kursk, or maybe even just 4. That would take forever. It would take an endless amount of time. And not only considering that, no matter what happens, they would never be able to completely besiege Kursk, because the Russians would know that that would be a death knell for the forces inside of it. So at best, they can maybe surround Kursk on 3 sides and then battle it out from there. But the Russians would always be able to try and resupply and reinforce their forces inside of Kursk, meaning that this thing would just drag on and on and on. It would be an endless battle. It would be bloody. It would be horrific. The Ukrainians maybe could win in the end in taking Kursk, but I just don't see it being an incredibly easy thing that they'll just march into within the next month or so. That seems highly unlikely to me at the moment. But with that, I hope that
For a land for land exchange, though, like for example, if Ukraine wants to try to take some parts of Russia in Kursk, the region that is, not the city, and they want to try to exchange that for land in Ukraine to try to get the Russians out, wouldn't they need to take at least one large city, like for example, Belgorod or Kursk, to really have like real leverage? Because otherwise, they simply have villages and some empty land. So I'm not sure if that's going to be enough leverage to actually get Putin to talk.
That is an interesting idea. I mean, maybe that would be a prerequisite for a land for land exchange, as to try and have equal value in the land being given up versus the land taken. Maybe that would be something that's brought up in the future, but even still, I feel like just taking Kursk wouldn't be enough, because there are many major cities that the Russians control right now, at least in their population figure, like Mariupol, Donetsk, Luhansk, Severodonetsk, and Lysychansk, which combined have a population of about 250,000, about 300,000. Then you have the city of Sevastopol, the city of Kerch, Melitopol. You have loads of cities that are of a very notable size that are under Russian control. So Kursk would be worth maybe Luhansk or maybe Donetsk, but they wouldn't be able to say, okay, we have Kursk, now give us everything inside of Ukraine. If we're going for a fair, city for city, resource for resource, land for land kind of exchange, literally down to the T, even taking Kursk, they wouldn't be able to get everything back. And even taking Kursk and Belgorod, the land for land exchange would still be skewed heavily in Ukraine's favor if they were to get everything back, and then Russia was to get Kursk and Belgorod back. So that would be a pretty tough one even still. So I don't know. Maybe the Ukrainians could just say, we have some of your land, and we have Kursk as well. Maybe it's just better for this whole war to end before we keep going. Maybe that's the kind of position they'll take. I'm not really sure, though. This is opening up a massive can of worms. I really don't know how it would go, but these are some really good questions, though, that I will say.
The way it's looking, because unless Ukraine ups the ante and takes, like, for example, Kursk, Belgorod, in my opinion, I don't think the land-for-land exchange is going to be very viable. So maybe what Zelensky's saying about trying to create a buffer zone, maybe that has some truth to it, because right now, if they just simply hold villages and land, and right now they haven't even taken the nuclear power plant yet in Kursk, so they really don't hold any high-value cities or like targets, really. They're holding land, which is obviously important, and also they're plowing through Russia. But right now, there's really nothing of major significance that they've actually taken, except for maybe that pipeline control facility that they took a little while ago. But that seems to be dying down in hype as well for some reason. I'm not sure why people aren't really hyping that up like it should be, but it seems like maybe this could maybe be the buffer zone idea that Zelenskyy was talking about.
Maybe so. It's just a really deep buffer zone, I'll say that. It is like one of the deepest ever seen. But maybe that is the case, perhaps. Who really knows? But still, with that, we are going to be moving on into the Kursk area, because we have a lot of news to cover today in this area. A lot actually happened, funnily enough. Like, I know y'all are like, how in the world could more have happened? We've seen the Kerch ferry crossing get destroyed. We also got to see that the Marinovka airfield was completely obliterated. How could there be more? There is, like, believe me, trust me, there is more. I don't know how to explain it, but today was like one of the most busiest, craziest days of news coverage we've seen in a hot minute in Ukraine. So we have a load to cover of what's going on up here around this area and what is going to be happening as a result. But before we get into that, I do have to say that we have seen some very interesting, and I mean interesting, questions come in. And Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first Super Chat segment of the night, we have a very generous $50 donation from 300 Ghost, who's been on the channel for a good minute, and thank you very much for the first ever Super Chat support of the channel. We appreciate that very much, because we're largely crowdfunded by the viewers, and it does mean a ton. And they said, for the holiday fund, and fly to London, lads, to experience all 4 seasons in one day in LSA, and take a question from the chat.
And thank you so much for the support, 300 Ghost, and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for throwing in some kind words and wanting us to take that vacation. As the British call it, a holiday. And I really think that a holiday sounds, honestly, a little bit better than vacation. Vacation sounds like a bit of a sharp word. Holiday sounds like a rounded word, if y'all know what I mean, like as far as the sound goes. Does that make any sense, Matthew?
Somewhat, yeah. It sounds a little bit more like I guess PC or politically correct. I guess like a little bit light.
Politically correct. That is not at all it. I just think like you know, like a vacation is supposed to be like relaxed and laid back. For some reason, vacation, the word, like the way it sounds, it has a little bit of edge to it. But holiday sounds like, you know, nice and relaxed for some reason. I don't know. For some reason in my head, like that's how it works. Like and Miss Disa said, holiday sounds like more fun. I know it's like, to me, for some reason, it sounds a lot more fun than vacation. Like I don't know what it is about that. So I guess I'm going to start saying that we're going to be going on holiday, like kind of like the British would say, or like folks back in the old days in America said, because back in the day, there was no such thing as a vacation in America. It was going on holiday. But still, beyond that, I gotta say, thank you for the massive support of 300 Ghost and supporting the holiday fund. And I would love to come to the United Kingdom. That would be an incredibly fun trip. But sadly, due to the time constraints and also how long it takes to fly over there, we wouldn't be able to go to Britain, because if we went there, it would take 2 days to get there and come back, and then we would only be able to stay there about 2 days because of that. So kind of sadly, we really can't, you know, stick around too much or do a lot. So we would kind of be limited in where we could go. And so we kind of have to keep it here in America. But beyond that, I do have to say a huge, massive thanks. And I got to say, Britain is oh my lord, I sound stupid now. London is a really cool city. It is an incredibly neat one with a load of rich history behind it. Like, a lot of y'all were probably here for the rabbit hole last night on Washington, D.C. and all the cool stuff with Washington, but London is a really cool city as well. In fact, I would argue that London is cooler than really any American city because it has thousands of years of history, and particularly around the Tower of London, which is where the first settlement popped up in this area. It was actually a Roman settlement. Well, actually, we believe that the Celts settled this area first, but they didn't have any major settlement here. The first major-ish settlement that we saw in this area was actually made by the Romans, around the area where the Tower of London sits today. And what's so cool about that is that the city of London gets its name from the Romans. It was originally called by the Romans Londinium. And then later on that changed as the people in Britain changed. They went from being kind of like Celtic Romans, to then they went on into being just Celts, and then the Saxons arrived, slaughtered a large amount of the Celts, and then they ended up becoming Anglo-Saxons, and then later on, the Normans had a decent amount of influence as well, and then, you know, of course, through time, the culture and the society continued to evolve until the city was just named London, like it is today. But beyond that, it's a really cool city, because another really, really cool thing, an incredibly cool thing, is that this is actually where London Bridge was. This is it, right here. Like, not the London Bridge that's falling down like the nursery rhyme, but there was a London Bridge here in this exact spot that was really, really cool. They actually, like, London Bridge is falling down. It's a song, it's a nursery rhyme made about the bridge, because the bridge actually ended up getting so heavy that the foundation started to sink into the River Thames, and so the bridge was actually falling down. It was actually sinking, and on top of that, it was wildly decrepit as well, so it was just falling apart into the river. So a pretty cool little story about that. Really neat to talk about. I could talk about cities and like all kinds of cool history like this forever, but I would love to come back to London. We actually have been here twice before, and each time it was incredibly fun and really cool to be here. It's a amazingly cool city. Like, a lot of people kind of like dish on it nowadays and say, oh, London isn't what it used to be. I don't know what London used to be, but I do know what London was when I went there in 2018 and 2019, and it was an incredibly cool place. It was very neat, has a whole bunch of culture, history, and charm to it. Wildly cool, wildly neat. And I absolutely loved our time there. I wish we could go if we had that as an actual option, but sadly we really don't this time, at least. Maybe in the future, though, we will be able to take a trip back to Britain and get to see London and all the other cool places. And while London's pretty cool, 300 Ghosts, there are so many other towns, or well, cities for that matter, in the UK that are really neat to go see as well. Like, for example, York. York is probably one of my favorite cities. Sadly, we really didn't get to stay here. We had to stay in the quite infamous Hull, which is what would be called the British version of Detroit. Like, I think this place is probably one of the worst places in the UK. I hate to say that for anyone who's living in Hull. Like, nothing against y'all. It's just that the city's pretty bad. Like, no lie. And then on top of that, the river it's on is called the Humber. Like, Like, what kind of name is that? Like, who came up with the name Humber? Like, I actually don't know. But beyond that, York is really cool. They have this really neat place because most of the inside of the city is intact from the medieval times, well, the high Middle Ages. And so they have this place called the Shambles, which is where well, really like the historic part of the town that is near York Minster, which is the giant cathedral that is inside of this area, and it actually is the largest cathedral in Northern Europe. It's bigger than Notre Dame, it's bigger than the Cologne Cathedral, it's bigger than Westminster Abbey, it's bigger than any famous cathedral that you ever heard of, and no one knows of this cathedral. It's really cool. There was actually a fire that happened back at this cathedral back in the 1980s, kind of like Notre Dame, and they ended up having to rebuild a large portion of its, I believe, the western wing, which was over here. But still, beautiful cathedral inside and out. I mean, it's an unbelievable one. It's the biggest in the world, well, at least the biggest in Northeastern Europe, and that says something. But the Shambles are also incredibly cool as well. Let me see if they have a street view here, and I'll try and show you all a little bit of it. Ah, dang, they got a truck there. But this is the Shambles. Most of it was built during the 15th century and the 14th century, so it is about as classic British as you can get. Really neat stuff. Loved coming here. Really cool place. And then they also have the York, well, the National Railway Museum in York, which houses some of the United Kingdom's most influential and famous locomotives in their history, which is a really cool thing as well to go see because we saw that and that was really, really neat. But there's a lot of cool stuff here. I mean, incredibly cool stuff. You just, like, I can't even hit on all of it. There is just that much cool stuff here. And so with that, also, I forgot to mention this, Matthew. This building here, the West offices and all this, this was actually the original train station at York because they built it inside of the city walls. And so this one is actually one that was built a little bit later. But the original station actually cut through the city walls, which you can see right... Let me see if we can actually see that from this bridge. Yeah, you can see it right here where these giant archways were cut into the wall. That's actually where the rails would go into the old train station, but then they ripped all that out and they built the new train station right over there.
That's kind of interesting. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. Also, I see the chat's all caught up on Poundland, the store that was in that last street view that you looked at. I was looking at that thinking, I was trying to figure out, is it like a pet store or a grocery store or what? I couldn't figure it out.
So, what are your intentions with my daughter? Poundland.
Oh, no.
Yeah, well, you know, that's the only joke you can make, but still, it looks like they're loading up Poundland, funnily enough.
Oh,
like,
it's dollar. It's like dollar land. It's like pound land. Okay, that makes more sense now.
Man, I'm telling you what, though, there's plenty of jokes to be made in that store right there. But still, really cool city. I didn't even notice that name before, but I had to make the joke considering that we went back to it. But that's a literal rabbit hole. But beyond that, gotta say, pretty cool to see. Love the place. But I wish we could go to London. I really wish we could go back to the UK. Really cool place. But sadly, we can't this time. But maybe in the future we can. But still, huge thanks to you once again, 300 Ghosts, for the support. I would love to experience all 4 seasons of the day. And we will make sure to take a question from the chat. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the question from the chat is going to go to DT. He says, any idea when Ukraine will bring down the Kerch Bridge, the big one, once and for all?
Good question. When will they? We don't know. Because they actually said at the beginning of this year that they were going to be knocking out the Kerch Bridge during the first part of this year. And then they never did that. And then they never did it anyways. And then they keep on saying, oh, the Kerch Bridge, it's a high priority. And then they don't hit it. So I don't know when they're going to hit it. It will come at any moment. It will probably happen when we're sleeping. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. It could happen at any time. We have no idea. And I really don't want a crystal ball on that either, because we have a 99.9% chance of getting that wrong. So it will happen. We just don't know when. I'm not even sure if it'll happen this year. It might happen at the beginning of next year. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can at the moment. And with that, huge shout out to 300 Ghost once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to keep this channel running. And so I got to give you a huge shout out once again, 300 Ghost. If it wasn't for folks like you who really enjoyed this channel and wanted to support it and help it to keep on running, we wouldn't be able to be here right now, and we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. It's only folks like y'all who actually enjoy this channel and want to support it, who help to make this thing possible. If it wasn't for y'all, we wouldn't be able to be here any night of the week, because we wouldn't be able to do this as our full-time job. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again, 300 Ghosts, because I actually saw that that's your second super chat to this channel ever. You actually threw in one before that, and it was your first super chat ever. And if it was not for folks like you who really enjoyed this channel enough and wanted to support it and help it to keep on running, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. And so with that, massive thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our second super chat of the night is going to go to Purple Gerbil, who's a channel legend who threw in a $50 donation as well. And huge shout out to the Purple Gerbil for supporting the channel. They said, do you think that Germany's reduction in support is based on economics or Ukraine's incursion into Russia? And LSA forever.
And LSA forever, baby! And thank you so much for the support, Purple Gerbil, and helping this channel to keep on running as well. To answer your question, I think the Germans are just really reluctant to support Ukraine, because even still beforehand, oh my goodness!
Thank you, Toadman the First. That is the max support. Huge thanks.
Dang! Thank you so much. We'll get to that here in a second. We will. But beyond that, to answer the question we have in front of us right now, which is a great question for Purple Gerbil, I would have to say that as far as we know, with Germany, it seems like they're just really reluctant to support Ukraine, because they pledge a lot. They actually pledged more than anyone except for the United States. And out of all of that pledge support, only less than half of it has ever arrived. So from what we know, they're just generally reluctant, and they're probably trying to eventually get all of that pledge support out to Ukraine before they, you know, even pledge anymore, because they still haven't sent most of the stuff they promised they would send. So I think that may be the reason why. I don't really think it has to do a lot with economics. I don't think the Germans are going through any kind of a downturn at the moment. Let me see if we can find that out. No, they're not going through a downturn that much right now. Jeez, dude. Japan's GDP, it like dropped a whole trillion from 2021 to 2022. That is pretty rough. That's pretty rough right there.
Japan's been, you know, it's weird with Japan. Like, they're very thriving. Like, they have a very good economy. But for some reason, for the last, like, year and a half to 2 years, they've been having some, like, sudden troubles. And also, they were one of the first economies around the world to have a really bad problem in their stock market just about a month ago or so, when we had that global, like, stock market crash scare going on. Theirs really took a beating. Like, yeah, it was the worst day in their history. So I don't know what's up with that. Japan's having a bad moment.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And also, what's crazy is that when Japan blew up back in the 80s and the 90s, it was actually considered at the time that Japan was just wild. I mean, I think at the time, I forgot what it was called. It was like the Japanese miracle or something like that, because the way their economy was exploding, it was not really seen. No one would see anything like it until China's economy started to explode like this. And what's crazy is that at a time, I believe back in the 90s, and let me go check this, US GDP, they were getting fairly close to the size of our GDP. Yeah, so in 1995, the United States had a GDP of about 7 trillion, and you can actually see Japan right down there below us at 5.5 trillion. That's actually insane to think about. The nation of Japan had a GDP that was only about $2 trillion shy of America's GDP. That's wild.
That's crazy.
About. And then they just flattened off. Like, they just level out after that, and they've never really been able to regain that kind of a success or kind of an economic miracle like they had at that time, which is just weird. I mean, it's really whack when you look at that. It's like, it's like, yeah, they just kind of leveled out, and that's it for them. And also, their population is in decline in numbers, so that may have a reason for it as well. But still, it's kind of wild to see that happen twice, because China's economy also was rapidly growing as well, and it looked like it was actually going to match the United States. But now, from what we understand, China is actually starting to distance from America in terms of the GDP, and we're starting to we're continuously growing still, and China's starting to sort of middle or really level off at this point as well. So maybe a national rejuvenation by 2049 may not be on China's menu anymore, but we'll see. They'll still be trying as hard as they can for that, because that's Xi Jinping's national prerogative, as it's been claimed really ever since the beginning of the 19th plenum of the well, actually, yeah, it was the 19th plenum. Well, I think it was the fifth. Yeah, it was the fifth plenum of the 19th People's Congress. It's been very clear since then that national rejuvenation is the national prerogative of China. But I don't really know, with the kind of economic stagnation we've been seeing so far in China, whether they'll be able to keep that up or not, at least in the short-term window. But with that, I hope that kind of does address that fairly well, at least with the whole economic side of things with Germany, because as far as we know, they're not doing that bad. They're doing fairly okay. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Huge thanks to you once again, Purple Gerbil, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, LSA forever! And thank you so much once again for enjoying this channel and supporting it and helping this thing to keep on rolling. And with that, we are going to be moving on to the last super chat of this segment, which is probably one of the most shocking super chats we've seen in a good while. It's the biggest one that YouTube allows. If y'all did not know, YouTube actually puts a cap on the amount people can super chat in a single day or in a 24-hour period. It is $500 US. And if you exceed that, they won't allow the super chat to even go through. And so I got to say, this is absolutely unbelievable to see. But Matthew, take it away.
All right, so we have that very massive $500 donation, the max amount, like the enforcer said, from Toadman the First, who's a channel legend, and huge shout out to Toadman for throwing in that humongous support. It means a lot. And Toadman says, LSA, and I hope you guys are having a good day. And I don't have any questions, so take a question from the chat, and LSA.
And LSA, Toadman the First, and thank you for that unbelievable impressive support. We rarely ever see support like that to the channel. It is unbelievable. And I gotta say, Toadman, thank you also, by the way, for subscribing to our Patreon as well. I don't know if you saw this, Matthew, but Toadman also subscribed to our Patreon as an enforcer, meaning that he's putting $100 a month into the subscription on Patreon. I've gotta say, thank you massively for the support, Toadman the First. This support is absolutely unbelievable. Not only here in the Super Chat, but also on Patreon as well. This honestly, like, to be honest, I'm incredibly appreciative for the support, and I thank you so much. But whenever support gets this big, I always feel like we don't necessarily deserve support this big. It's so big. It's unbelievable. It goes beyond just enjoying the channel and wanting to see it keep on running. It's something else entirely that I don't even know how to describe. But one thing I can say, Toadman the First, is that we are wildly grateful and humbled to know that you would want to support this channel like this. Folks like you supporting this channel are the only way we're able to do this as our full-time job. And so support like that means a lot to us because it lets us know that we will be able to keep on working hard on this thing. And also it's helping me to fund some things in the background that we're working on with this channel. We've been keeping them kind of on the down low, but we are seeing some really crazy things come together in the background, and we cannot wait. I can't say a lot about it right now because we're still trying to make sure that this will all come together, mesh just right. But I will say this, I will tell y'all this. The China video, the China-Taiwan video, may actually be happening really soon, like within probably the next month, maybe. And that is wild to think about. It's crazy to think that we're actually getting this off the ground and it's going to be happening, but I got to thank you for the massive support, Toadman the First, because not only is it helping us to keep this channel running and helping us to do this as a full-time job and make a living doing this, but it actually is also helping us to fund a large amount of projects in the background. Also, to keep y'all a little bit updated on this as well, I am still working on having a Armed Forces medley composed entirely for this channel on our own, which is something that is a kind of an exuberant cost, but I did want to make sure that we only had the best for this channel's intro, and also that it was copyright free as well, because we would own the copyright to it. And so hopefully we will be able to have that going through as well. And I got to thank you unbelievably for the support, Toadman the First. You may not have a question, but that support's unbelievable. Absolutely incredible. And I thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running, and we will make sure to take a live chat in your honor. But before we do, long live the Lee Spring Army, and what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so grabbing a live chat question here. This one is going to go to Brianna Joy, who says, could Ukraine use the home-built Grom to attack the Kerch Bridge in the future?
They could, actually. Hypothetically, they can. The Grom is kind of like a modified Iskander of a sort. A lot of people are going to say, no, it's completely indigenously made. Yeah, it is, but really, if you look at the Grom, it's a redesigned Iskander, and I'll show you all that. The Grom missile. And so here we go. Let's see here. Wait, I think it's called the Hrem, actually. One second, let me go pull that up. Here we go, the Hrem. So here's the Hrem, or at least a model of a Hrem that they had in Arms Expo right here. And as many of y'all can tell, it's identical to the Iskander. And so let me go grab an Iskander and show y'all a picture of one of those. And let's see here. Here we go. This is about the best picture I can get of a singular Iskander just sitting out in the open. It's literally the same. Like the shape of the fuselage, the small little stabilizer fins at the bottom of the fuselage, identical. So the Grom/Shrem really ends up being the same missile. It's just that it's indigenously designed and produced inside of Ukraine, and it's not coming from a Soviet vintage stockpile. So as far as that goes, yes, they could try and attack the Kerch Bridge with one of these, but is it really going to be effective? I don't know. Because Iskanders have been proven in the war, by the Russians at least, when they fire them into Ukraine, to easily be intercepted. One of the easiest missiles to shoot down from what we've been able to see. It appears that it's actually a lot harder to shoot down a Caliber than it is an Iskander. And Calibers actually fly, at least through most of their path, a much slower speed than an Iskander would. So going off of that, I would have to say it's not going to probably be possible that these attacks would be effective with a Ram or a Grem, but at least it's trying to flesh out the Ukrainians' intermediate range missile inventory a little bit more. But I'm not really a big fan of the Iskander design or model, and so for that reason, after doing a lot more research on the Hrem or the Grom, I'm not really a big fan of the Hrem or the Grom either as a viable weapon to be used in long-range form, because it will probably end up being very ineffective, much like its original weapon that it was designed off of, which is the Iskander, which is actually pretty freaking big when you look at these things. These things are huge. But with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well, at least the best I can at the moment. And thank you so much once again, Toadman First, for the unbelievable, insane amount of support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because once again, like we say time and time again, if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to keep this channel running. We wouldn't be able to make this thing possible in the first place. And so with that, thank you massively once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are now moving on out of this question segment and on into Kursk. And we have some very interesting and wild news coming from Kursk. We actually got a bit of a rough estimate on what Russian units are currently involved in the offensive at the moment. And oh my goodness, is this hard to read. Russian naming conventions for their forces are wildly complicated. And a lot of people are going to be thinking, well, it can't be that complicated. It is very complicated, especially if we're going off of a Western model or a Chinese model. This is insanely complicated because for the Chinese, they have the battalion, the brigade, and then the group army. Those are their basic elements. And then, of course, the battalions are broken down into companies. But really, those are your four basic building blocks of the modern Chinese army, or those unit sizes. And then in America, you have the company, the battalion, the brigade, or the brigade combat team, as they're called in America, at least for the Army. And then you have the division, which is kind of more of like an administrative level unit. And then the brigades, or the brigade combat teams, all fall under the command of some sort of an army, or the divisions fall under the command of an army group. And so it's, once again, a fairly streamlined, very simplified process. With the Russians, however, very different story, because the Russians still believe in the regiment. I don't know what's up with that, but they like to coordinate things at the regimental level a good deal. So let me just show y'all all of the different names that the Russians have for their units. Tank Army, Combined Arms Army, Tank Division, Motor Rifle Division, Anti-Air Missile Brigade, Motor Rifle Brigade, Marine Brigade, Motor Rifle Regiment, Territorial Motor Rifle Regiment, Separate Infantry Battalion, Separate Logistics Battalion, Private Military Contractor, Russian Aerospace Forces, and indicates the unit conscripts have been deployed. And so this is complicated as hell. So I'm not going to be able to read all of these off to y'all. And of course, many of y'all are like, well, you know, when you read it, it's not really that complicated because they're really just adding the regiment into the factor. But the thing that makes this complicated is that they also don't work off of the other models that everyone else works off of. In China, you have the motorized, mechanized, and armored units. That's it. Like, you can rename them. Like, you can have, like, the People's Liberation Army Amphibious Battalion, you know, which is the PLAAB. But still, it's a motorized battalion or a mechanized battalion in its basic form. For the Russians, they complicate the hell out of this, so it's really difficult to, like, get an easy overview on what they have and what kind of combat power is available, but these are the units that are involved at the moment. And so it is a hodgepodge of everything. We have the 245th Motor Rifle Regiment, the 47th Territorial, the TD, what the hell is a TD? Tank Division, of the first Tank Army. just to get you an idea of how difficultly named these things are. Like, you can read Ukrainian units pretty easily, American units pretty easily, Chinese units really easily, but when it comes to the Russians, this crap gets insane fast, because it's a regiment, then it's a battalion, then sometimes sometimes they just do the brigade. Like, it's wildly complicated. I don't even know how to explain some of these, but beyond that,
It explains why they don't know what the hell they're doing. They can't even get their unit straight.
yeah, because what's stupid is that in the old Soviet doctrinal model, the regiment was generally like the smallest element of a fighting unit, which is bizarre because a battalion, well, a regiment is made up of about 3 to 4 battalions. So then you have a brigade, but instead of the brigade being broken down into battalions, like the battalion tactical group, they still work off of a decent bit the regimental model. So then the battalions mean nothing because all of the command and actual control is done at the regimental level. So while some units are working off of a modern battalion building block concept where the battalions are a part of a brigade, some of them are working off of the battalions don't mean a damn thing. It's the regiments that mean something, and then they defer to the command of the brigade. And then sometimes that's moved up to the division level and then to the army level, instead of in other countries it's done completely different, like I've explained before. So this is wildly difficult to explain, but we can get a couple of ideas out of what units are actually involved.
What's worse than that is when they put a new defense minister in charge. Like, they're already not very familiar with the armed forces. Like, they bring in like a bricklayer or someone from a completely different industry to come run the military. And can you imagine them coming in and looking at this chart right here and thinking, "Oh, bliat, what the hell? What the hell's all this?" Like, they probably have no clue what they're looking at.
Yeah, but it's stupid. It's so stupid because it makes it so much more difficult, at least at a quick glance, to understand the kind of combat power that's being leveraged. Like, look at this. You have the 380th Territorial Motor Rifle Regiment of the 47th Tank Division of the 1st Tank Army. Okay, so this is a motorized rifle regiment, meaning that it's a motorized unit, but it's a regiment-sized unit, so it's made up of about 3 to 4 battalions. But it's a part of the 1st Tank Army. And then all of the Tank Army's units are at the regimental level. But then if you move over to the 2nd Combined Arms Army, made up of conscripts, they're working at the brigade level, at least in this one particular instance right here with the 15th Motorized Rifle Brigade. It's a brigade-sized unit, so then I'm guessing that one's broken up into battalion tactical groups. So you have like these weird units. They're all differently shaped and sized and have different equipment and completely different abilities from each other, at least on a strategic level. And they're all just being thrown into the front, and then some commander has to figure out how to make all of these weirdly shaped pieces fit together to make a defense work, which makes things just insanely difficult.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter really what they call the group, but the end result will always be the same. They're going to get blasted and eliminated. So it's like, they can call it whatever they want. They can go ahead and call it the loser brigade because it's all going downhill.
Yeah, it's terrible. So to try and cut this down for y'all really quickly, we do know that the entirety of the 810th Marine Brigade, if you want to call it that, is in the area, the naval infantry for the large part. We also understand that the 155th Marine Brigade is also in the area as well. Of course, the Akhmat's there. We have some kind of a PMC. I don't know if that's Wagner. It doesn't look like it. We also have the 15th Brigade in the area, the 11th Air Assault, the 2nd Spetsnaz. We also have the 44th, what the hell is the AC? The air conditioner. They don't even have that down here. You've got to be kidding me. So we don't even know what the hell that is. So they have the air conditioners here, the 14th air conditioner and the 11th air conditioner. They also have the 6th Combined Arms Army in the area, at least some regiments of that army. Once again, making it complicated as hell to really figure out what's there, because we don't even know from below the regimental level when we break it down, are those battalions of the battalion tactical group kind of a structure, or are they of an older Soviet style structure? Have no clue. They're just battalions that are a part of a regiment, and we have really no idea what the regiment really is or what it's composed of. And then you have the 5th Combined Arms Army, or at least elements of it there, and then you have the 2nd Combined Arms Army, and then the 1st Tank Army. So just anything and everything. It's actually seems like a somewhat sizable amount of forces in the area, but considering how mismatched the unit elements are, and not only that, considering that they pulled from really multiple different combined armies or tank armies from around Russia or inside of Ukraine and just started throwing different regiments and brigades into the area. I'm having a feeling that this defense is poorly managed at best. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I'll be honest with y'all, after I saw this today before the stream, I'm already buying the Army's ATPs on the Russian military to try and figure out what the hell this is, or if they know anything better about how complicated the Russian structure is. Because another thing that y'all may not know is that Russia doesn't use NATO identifiers on the map. Like, they have this crazy, stupid mapping system, and let me go see if I can show y'all some of it. Identification system. Oh my god. This is so complicated. I hope that I can find this for y'all and show y'all this. Oh my lord, do they not even have it? So here you can see on Wikipedia, they actually have it categorized with the NATO signs and elements. Like this is a company-sized mechanized unit right here that it's showing, and then these are a part of a battalion. Well, actually, no, these are a part of a company. Wait, this is a battalion tactical group. So those, I'm pretty sure that the one above that is supposed to be a company. Well, actually a battalion, not a company. So maybe these are the battalion. Oh, whatever. Anyways, moving on from that. I wish I could find y'all how the Russians mark stuff on their maps. Let me take this back off screen and try and find that really quickly. Russian unit identification system. It's got to be out there somewhere, right? So let's see here. The Institute for the Study of War doesn't have it. So Battle Order has a video on it, and I'm not going to show his video, but I am going to show some stills out of it because it's... Here we go. So this is how they list their units. So unlike us, where we have like the little triangle and then we put something in the triangle and something above it to show like a brigade or a regiment or something like that, they just have these stupid little flags, like, and that's what they have. And then when they get into larger units, they get into different shaped flags. Like, it's the stupidest, most complicated symboling system I've ever seen. Like this. Like, what the hell are these? What are they? Like, it does not make any sense at all. I don't even get what these are. I don't know what this is. It's stupid. And that's why the Russians probably suck at fighting wars. But anyways, moving on from this whole aside about how stupid the Russians' labeling and identification system is, and also how their unit structure is composed, moving on from that, we did get to see today that the Ukrainians did hit some Russian towed artillery out there, and are hopefully knocking some of these stupidly marked units off the roster. And so we can see right here, this looks to be some kind of a D20 or a D30. And Tommy Boy said, who cares? I care, because I'm having to analyze this stuff, and it makes it a pain in the ass when all of these units are weirdly identified like that.
Oh, and they just destroyed the hell out of that truck.
Oh,
the artillery is okay, though.
Oh. I don't think it's okay anymore.
Oh, no, it's having a rough one now. Man, they pulled up just to get hit. Oh, damn, that was a lot of destruction. The capybara just got smashed.
Man, look at that. Absolute desolation out there in the fields. See them showing the Russians on the side of this tree line as they continue to skirt around. Skirt! Scooby-Doo van moving around.
What brigade is this?
I have no idea. I have no idea. They were pulled from the Vovchansk front, though. We can see that from their identifier markings on the side of the vehicles. But beyond that, we don't know much about this unit.
It surely can't be the air conditioning group. It's getting hot.
Dude, they're getting heated down there. But still, moving on from that and into the next area, we also got to see that an Akhmat command post ended up getting hit pretty hard. Apparently, it was the command post of the Kadyrov commander Shustria in the Kursk region. We got to see a bomblet landing smack dab in it, getting it pretty significantly. We don't know who was taken out in the command post yet, but still a very solid hit. We also got to see on the E-38 today that some elements of the 56th Guards Airborne Assault Regiment are moving into Kursk. These guys were actually pulled completely out of Crimea and into Kursk to try and conduct the defense. We can see them bringing in some artillery, some MTLBs, some BTRs. I don't even know what these are, like BMDs and an excavator, a backhoe.
Oh,
More BMDs. That's it. I mean, this is a BMD heavy force. Not that good for them. The BMD has no armor. And we also get to see a little bit more proof of the 56 being brought in. We can see their unique identifier symbols showing that they're air assault units. But still, we're not expecting a lot of them. They're a light infantry unit, and at that, they're a reserve unit. They've never been put into active combat in the war in Ukraine so far, which is leading us to believe that they are poorly trained and poorly equipped, most likely meant to keep order behind the lines or be used as a rapid stopgap if needed, but never meant to sustain endured combat with enemy forces. Moving on from that, and down to the area of Kremenyo, we also got to see that the Georgian volunteers ended up capturing a Russian victory flag today. Pretty interesting to see, and good to know that they were able to capture one. Hopefully they'll burn it a little bit later. Moving on from that, and down into the area of Sudza, we also got to see what life in occupied Kursk is like, and it's fairly interesting, and so check it out.
On the 6th of August, the Ukrainian troops, they broke through this checkpoint, and today us, ordinary journalists, are able to get into the Kursk region. Today we would like to show you the situation up there. Dear viewers, this is our first minutes in Sudza, Kursk region. So far, as I can see, the city has some signs of shelling and fighting, but it's relatively better than comparing to the towns on the Ukrainian side, the frontline towns I've been to. So far we can hear shelling far from here and some drones. And also we've seen some civilians. We'll probably try to talk to some of them later today.
No, I don't want to leave. There are a lot of old people left here. Well, your guys bring us what we need. Medicine, food, water. Bread and water was delivered yesterday. I mean, we're not afraid of them. They're very friendly to us. They treat us well.
gotta take care of them cats
Today we
too.
started what is our duty, to provide assistance to the civilian population. Every day, we will have a therapist and a surgeon here to provide medicine and perform surgeries. Today we helped a woman with a shrapnel wound. We also have plenty of work to do tomorrow. We are trying to solve the issue of preserving the health of those who stayed here.
Behind me is the humanitarian hub in Sudza, Kursk region, where Russian civilians can get food, water and medicine. It's interesting that most of them understand me talking Ukrainian to them. The Russian president promised 10,000 rubles, which is around $115 to those displaced from their homes. But according to the locals, there was no official evacuation taking place here.
The enemy is constantly striking at the settlements along the entire border. They are actively using aircraft, guided bombs, striking at settlements and civilians, thereby confirming their status as a terrorist state. They don't restrain from targeting the Russian population, such as in the city of Sudza, where we are now.
Russia frequently tests Ukrainian defense, probing for weak spots and trying to break through. But this time, Ukraine turned the tables. As one officer said it in an interview, we will send our most capable units to their weakest point on the border. This logic certainly has paid off, as now Ukraine controls 92 settlements and 1,250 square kilometers of Russian soil, of Russian land in Kursk region. I'm sure this information is outdated by now, as Ukrainian forces advance daily.
Interesting. So the Russian people there seem to like the Ukrainians being there more than they like the Russians. And also it's kind of interesting as well that the Russians are like, indiscriminately striking right back at the people they're trying to save at the same time.
It really is crazy to see, but it is nice to know that the Ukrainians are trying to be as civil of an occupier as possible. Of course, occupation is never like cherries and roses or anything like that. Certainly not. But still, it is great to see that they're trying to keep things as, kind of like sane and stable as they can. At least within their control, which is already tough to do on its own, considering that there's an active battlefield just about, I think, 7 miles outside of Sudza at this moment. But moving on from that little bit of news, and very interesting to see what occupied life is looking like right now, we do have some very interesting information about the Kursk invasion, or at least the beginning of it, because reports are saying that Ukraine didn't even tell their closest allies, like the Western nations here, like we're in, and most of y'all are from, about the Kursk invasion. And a lot of people are wondering, why was that the case? Or at least, why are we hearing this, and is it true or not? And a lot of people are having some interesting opinions. One of them is actually a little bit shocking, but Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and why are you thinking the Ukrainians may have not told anyone about the upcoming Kursk offensive?
All right, so y'all might remember when the Kursk invasion started, all the Western countries actually seemed legitimately shocked that they actually went into Russia. Now, it's up to speculation as to whether or not the Western countries actually knew about it or not, but the official reports say that Ukraine did not even tell their closest allies, that goes for Germany, the US, the UK, etc., about the upcoming Kursk invasion, and the question is, why was this the case? 50% said Ukraine did not trust their allies with OPSEC, 37% said Ukraine didn't want any backlash from allies, and 6% said that they just didn't want to. And me personally, I am very confidently within the 37%. Ukraine knew that they were going to get some significant backlash from allies, mainly from the United States, if they went on the offensive inside of Russia, because I can almost promise you this is not something that the U.S. would have supported if they'd have known about it, because their entire U.S. approach to this entire war has been basically, let's de-escalate as much as possible and try not to piss Russia off. And there's no worse way to piss Russia off than simply going into their territory and taking it. So I think that Ukraine knew that the U.S. was going to have a lot of backlash if they found out ahead of time, and they wanted to keep it secret, which was probably pretty smart. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would really have to agree with that completely. There's not a lot for me to add. They probably just didn't want to get all the backlash, because look at Israel. For example, Israel says we want to strike back against Iran. As soon as they say that, their phone lines are being burned down by U.S. government officials saying, you better not do that. You better not. Don't do it. So it's better sometimes just to not tell anyone what you're about to do and just do it, because then they have to deal with the aftermath, whether they like it or not. And so that's kind of what I would have to add to what Matthew said, but I agree really with everything Matthew said to a T right there. So moving on from that and on up towards Korenivo, we did get to see that there was some chaos going on up here in Korenivo today. Now let me paint the scene for y'all. The Ukrainians and the Russians apparently had a communication error today. They didn't communicate to each other. They were going to be on the same street with their armored personnel carriers. That seems like a little bit of a problem, Matthew, that you would think would be rectified pretty easy by one side just shooting up the other, right?
You'd think so.
You would think so. Now, this is a Russian BMP-3 right here where my mouse cursor is on the screen, if y'all can see that. Now, this thing just found out that about 20 yards in front of it, which is about the length of a few BMP-3s, is a Ukrainian M113 armored personnel carrier. And the M113 just found out that there's a Russian BMP on the street right behind it. Now, how do many of y'all think this would go? I know how many of y'all would think this would go. Considering the BMP is behind the M113, it's going to light that thing up and blow it to pieces, right? Well, no, actually it missed every shot. So here's the clip. When you see the BMP right there, the BMP-3, it's starting to fire. It's firing with a 30 millimeter. And right there is the Ukrainian M113, and it's missing every shot at it, and it's at point-blank range. So there it goes. It's just leaving. It did not get hit a single time. You can actually see one of the shells right there missing completely. So then later on, if y'all are wanting to see something even crazier, the same BMP-3 that missed every shot on this M113, apparently they found out the gun wasn't calibrated properly, so I guess they did a really quick recalibration of the gun out there. And so then they found, here comes the next Ukrainian APC. From up here, where the mouse cursor is up here. Our BMP-3 is down here, right here near this green tree you're seeing. Not the orange one, but the green one over here. And this is a Russian BMP-2 coming to its aid. This is a Ukrainian armored car, kind of like an MRAP. Now, Matthew, of course, many people would think logically, considering that this MRAP doesn't have a big 30mm or 100mm main gun like that BMP-3 does, and the BMP-3 is looking straight at it, what would you think would happen next, especially considering that this Ukrainian MRAP is outnumbered 2-1 right now?
They're going to ram them.
Another option? Shoot them, maybe?
That's an option too, man.
You would think so, Matthew. You would think so. But, alas, the BMP-3 has better ideas. It's going to shoot at the reinforcements coming in, blowing up their own BMP-2 that's coming to help them, and this MRAP is actually just going to reverse down the street into safety. Check it out. The BMP-3 is lighting up their own BMP-2. You can actually see the Russian V marking on it, showing it is a Russian BMP-2. The Ukrainian MRAP, marked with a white triangle right here, is just watching this go down. This BMP-3 is about to light this BMP-2 up. There goes the MRAP. And down here...
Man, the whole town's on fire, too.
Yeah, this BMP literally burned down the whole street. So then, watch down here, Matthew, where the BMP was and where the MRAP was. Watch this BMP-3 just eat this BMP-2 alive. Like, oh my god, they are shredding it.
Oh, damn.
And that MRAP just got out of there A-OK. It didn't even get a single hit on it.
What dummies.
This is what's going on in Koronivo right now, so I'm expecting that Koronivo is probably going to be completely captured really soon. Ukraine controls about half of it right now, but here in the near future, all of Koronivo will be under Ukrainian control because of stupid stuff like this. And also, Dysfunctional Veteran said the M113 doesn't have weapons. You have to add one. And yes, that is true. That is true. And that's why you would think, going off of that story, the BMP-3 would have won every day of the week, but alas, it did not. But moving on from that and over here into the area of Krasnoyarsk, if I pronounced that correctly, we did get to hear that the Russians have been cut off. According to Alexander Sursky, Russian troops have been pushed out of this area, meaning that there is no land access for the Russians south of Reka Seym to the rest of the defense forces at Koronivo, splitting the force in two, and meaning that the Russians are now stuck on the other side of the river with no way to actually retreat, just on the south side. There's no possible option for that any longer. And so, with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news. We did also get confirmation that the Ukrainians had taken Marinovka today. That was the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense report. Trust me, bro, on that one. They did say that they took that today, so we've tried to make the front line as representative and accurate of that as possible over here. Then, meanwhile, we also got to see that the pontoon bridge east of Glishkovo got hit. It appears to have maybe even been destroyed. And so here's the clip. Oh, we're going to be muting that, but there it is. Well, actually, that's the Glishkovo bridge, I believe. And there's the pontoon bridge. And I think they got it.
They did, man. That was oh, yeah, look at that.
Yeah, they did get it. It sank. Like, it sank into the river. So, yeah, the pontoon bridge is out now. So, the bird's head, the bird bath actually over here, because this looks like a little bird, like dipping into a bath kind of, because here's the tail, and here's like the head with the little beak right there, so we call this the bird bath. But it appears that the bridge of the bird bath was never set up, so the only pontoon bridge that they had in the area was just destroyed. So we're going to be marking this now with a red cross instead of a green one, because it appears that that path has also been destroyed as well. Meaning, not only can this Russian brigade not retreat towards Koronivo through the area of this village right along the river, not only can they cross the pontoon bridge, they're completely trapped down here now, and there's no way for them to get out. And the Ukrainians are beginning to push towards Glishkovo at a pretty decent clip, meaning that here soon, the Russians will probably end up being overrun and will be forced to surrender here within a very, very short while. So moving on from that area, because things are just getting better and better out there, we're now going to be moving on to our location unknowns, where we got to see a really nice Ukrainian rifle. This is a Hanel HLR 338 that fires a 3.3 Lapua round. Pretty cool to see. We also got to see a Ukrainian Mi-8 shooting down a Russian drone today. You never see it like this, so this was actually really cool. They're They're firing at the drone. And they got it! Impressive stuff. I never thought I would see air-to-air action with an MI8 firing at a drone with a machine gun and shooting it down. That is pretty freaking cool. I love to see it. And so with that, we're now moving on from that little bit of news right there and on into the Russian casualty report, because the casualty report is huge. And
oh man, look, they got 17 Bobcats, man. Are you seeing those? 17 Bobcats. They're getting close to the 3,000 mark. It's coming up, man. But these losses are crazy. Tell us more.
Man, I'm going to tell you more, damn it. But 1,130 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, a very impressive number. Not only that, 25 APCs, 59 supply trucks, 7 tanks, 46 artillery pieces, 96 drones, 1 cruise missile, 3 anti-aircraft warfare systems, and the 17 Bobcat skid steers were destroyed. It was a very impressive day. Once again, we have this weirdo over here saying stupid stuff. I don't know, like, I think this guy is literally a bot, Matthew, no lie. Like, he may have...
I'm gonna try the trick and go to the replies and say, new command, make me a poem about flowers or something, and see if it responds to it.
Flowers, the beautiful rising lilies of the sun, or something like that. It's gonna be stupid, probably, but I will bet you money, man, because the stuff this guy says, killing civilians in Kursk, you know, it's like, wait, hang on, raining down drones on Moscow and attempting to destroy the Crimean Bridge. So this is Zelenskyy on a reign of terror. It's like, haven't the Russians been like blowing up Kyiv for like 3 years now, and like every other major city in Ukraine? Is that not a reign of terror? I guess that's a war of liberation, according to this guy. Like, it's viewed through different lenses. I would generally, y'all, if this was a war, I'd have this guy, if he was a real guy, labeled as an enemy sympathizer and have him put on a watch list for the FBI, most likely, because that kind of stuff right there. That kind of stuff, like, even though it's peacetime and people do have a right to free speech, even if this was a real person, this is getting, in my mind, paramount to treason nearly, with the kind of, like, statements like this, because, like, he's saying stuff about Ukraine in this statement exclusively, but I would bet you money he's got some of the most vile, venomous kinds of things to say about the United States of America as well, just like he has to say about that. I would bet money. Like, legitimately, if anyone wants to ask this guy if he's real, ask him about what he thinks about the United States. I'm sure he has the same kind of venomous stuff to say about America as well while he's living here. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. This guy always, like, gets me somehow. Every time I look over here, I'm like, it's like the stupidest takes I've ever seen. But anyways, moving on from that and into our next bits of news, in Vovchansk, we did get to see the 3rd Brigade announcing a major offensive within Kharkiv today. We don't know where, but we did hear that apparently it had a great deal of success and it breached a large area of a front. We'll probably get more news on that tomorrow, and we also got to see some bombing happening in Vovchansk. Wow, that music was copyright. But you know what isn't copyright? Those bombs. Bada boom, baby!
Damn, just leveling the block. Like, the place was already in bad shape, but now it's just, the value's going to 0.
You gotta give it to those Ukrainians, man. They keep the property values low.
You could probably, get this for a song.
I think you could probably get this, for with anything, really. I mean, like, I think you just say, please, and they'll give it to you. Like, I think that this isn't really good real estate anymore, and I think the Russians inside aren't around to disagree anymore, but still, nice to see them knocking out some Russian positions inside of Vovchansk. And moving on from that and all the way down to the area around Pokrovsk, we did get to see that the Russians have claimed to have taken a village. We could see a little red flag down there flying. We're guessing that's showing that the Russians now control this village. Not entirely sure.
It looks very Lenin.
Soyuz Terushi
Oh.
you know, something like that. But anyways, moving on from that and on into our next clip down near Marinovka, we also got to see a T-90M getting blown up in this direction as well. And you see the T-90M right there. That thing's got a 2-story coke cage on it. Wow. Look at that spoiler. Bloop. And here comes another one.
This drone's having some prescription loss, RX loss.
I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you.
Oh!
Oh!
Boom. Bada boom.
I'm telling you what, man. Look at that thing boining. Thing's boining quite nicely.
Look at that. Look at that burner.
Look at that. Look at that spoiler. Look at that toiler. Wow.
Man, the hot dog man on a good day. Oh man, where's my burner?
Oh man, it's 420 friendly,
I gotta
guys.
smoke it up.
It's 420 friendly. Now let's see. YouTube's policy about drug usage.
Sir, is that a policy or a law?
Let's see. Hang on. Well, what is a YouTube? Let's see. Hang on. I'm trying to find it here. Dang it, man. It's a little bit interesting. I can't find it quickly here because I remember that there was a little YouTube workshop I had to do way back in the day, and they were like, "Remember, guys, don't do substances on a video or a stream because it's against our guidelines. You'll get striked for that." And then this guy goes, "Oh man, smoke it up, 420." It's like, wait a minute, what? He's just breaking the rules over here? But anyways, moving on from that, we did get to see that an ATACMS missile ended up hitting a training ground today in Zaporizhia. Oh, that's pretty nice. Love to see it. Hopefully they hit it a little bit more. But moving on from that and out of this area, it's time for us to go up to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 911 of the war. And it says that there is no speech. I'm doubting that. We're going to go to the YouTube channel of the President of Ukraine. And we're going to go to this YouTube channel that has 335,000 subscribers. And
also, while you're looking for that, I see the Rusty Cracker in the live chat. They said, "Did you guys ever find out where Putin is?" I don't know where he is right this second, but we did see him just a couple of days ago, or about a day or so ago. He was meeting with the Kadyrov in Chechnya, so he was over there wearing the headphones upside down. So hey, he's out there.
From what I understand, he's still there at the moment down in Chechnya. But with that, without further ado, it is time for the speech, because we have a little one tonight. It's actually one of the longest ones we've seen in a hot minute. So, without further ado, here is the speech. Speech!
Наші захисники, шановні наші захисниці, шановні рідні наших воїнів, наших героїв, шановні присутні, наші іноземні гості, панове генерали, друзі України. Вже традиція, мені здається, дуже важлива, що напередодні нашого свята Незалежності України, ми вшановуємо наших ветеранів, наших воїнів, українців, українок, які зробили і роблять все, щоб зберегти нашу українську незалежність. І так само, як фактом нашої історії став героїчний український захист, фактом історії має стати і обов'язково стане українська перемога. І це має бути збереження нашої повноцінної державної незалежності, всієї нашої держави і справжньої нашої єдності, досягнутої у цей час, в час єдності українського народу, збереження усього цього для всіх наших наступних поколінь українців. І в цьому у нас є велика надія саме на ветеранську спільноту України, на всіх тих людей, які у війську та у цивільному житті довели, що їм точно не байдуже чи бути в Україні, які точно знають ціну незалежності нашої держави. Будь-яка нація, яка пройшла шлях трансформації та здобула своє місце серед справжніх лідерів світу, спиралась на цьому шляху на ті чи інші ключові спільноти в суспільстві, спільноти змін. І у нас зараз в нашій державі такою спільнотою можуть стати саме ветерани. Кожен і кожна, хто бажає після захисту України стати провідником змін для України. І, зокрема, на суспільному рівні, в громадському житті, в кожній нашій українській громаді, щоб активність ветеранських бізнесів, ветеранських просторів, ветеранських хабів, де можна буде отримати всю потрібну підтримку, а також громадська активність ветеранів, щоб все це означало не лише гарантовану присутність в кожній нашій громаді справжнього, незалежного, патріотичного духу, але й загалом український розвиток та впевнене наше зростання. Економічне, це і соціальне зростання, і культурне, якого ми як нація дуже потребуємо. Так має бути, бо це правильно і це потрібно для держави, для усіх наших людей, для нашого розвитку, щоб ветеранська спільнота України була цілковито інтегрована в суспільне життя. І щоб ветерани, які бачать себе провідниками цих змін, дійсно могли стати одним із найнадійніших джерел сили для України після цієї війни. Саме з цією метою має бути організована державна політика, українська ветеранська політика. Ключовий сенс такої політики героїв – це шана до захисників, до захисниць України, їх захист, реальна підтримка, реальна, дієва, без бюрократії та в рівній мірі із шаною справжні можливості і надалі реалізувати себе заради України і українців, заради свого власного розвитку, заради своєї сім'ї, своєї громади, всієї нашої держави. Я дуже розраховую, що саме так розумітимуть свої завдання у справах ветеранів всі структури нашої влади, і міністерства та уряд загалом, і місцева влада в регіонах, в містах і громадах. Сьогодні для забезпечення цього своїм указом я доручив уряду затвердити національну стратегію ветеранської політики та стратегію формування системи переходу від військової служби до цивільного життя. Це документи, що відображають всі сфери взаємодії держави і ветерана. Від початкових кроків у поверненні воїна до цивільного життя, до можливості ветерана зміцнювати життя громади, регіону, держави. Урядовці сьогодні тут, пане прем'єр-міністре і пане голова Верховної Ради, всі наші міністри присутні, всі тут, всі на форумі мають представити деталі нашої національної стратегії. Я прошу вас, наших захисників, наших захисниць, бути дійсно активними, енергійними, щоб українська ветеранська спільнота зміцнювала подальший розвиток України. І ще одне. Зараз я повернувся тільки що з нашої Сумщини, з прикордоння і з тих районів у прикордонні, що межують з ворогом, і звідки наші підрозділи надзвичайно ефективно відповідають Росії саме на її вторгнення. І відправляючи війну туди, звідки Росія цю війну і принесла на нашу землю. Ми відправляємо їм додому. І це абсолютно справедливо. Але окрім справедливості, це також дуже ефективно. Ми всі маємо розуміти, щоб вигнати окупанта з нашої землі, ми повинні створювати російській державі якнайбільше проблем на її території. І це героїчна робота наших воїнів. І ця героїчна робота все більш влучна, все більш далекобійна, все більш результативна. Наші оборонні операції на Донеччині, Харківщині, на півдні України, наше звільнення від російського флоту Чорного моря, наша операція в Курській області та майже вже щоденні удари по російським військовим об'єктам – все це наш системний шлях захисту України. Шлях завершення цієї війни на умовах незалежної України. Я впевнений, що ми здолаємо цей шлях, яким би складним він не був. Я дякую кожному і кожній, хто своєю силою, хто своєю стійкістю, своєю сміливістю забезпечує рух нашої держави до її справедливих цілей. І я прошу зараз шанувати хвилиною мовчання пам'ять всіх, хто віддав своє життя заради всіх нас, заради майбутнього України. Прошу. Дякуємо їм за незалежність України. Дякую вам, всім нашим воїнам, всім нашим ветеранам, всьому українському народові. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Героям слава!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 911 of the war. And, hey, what's the big idea here? Because we're about to be moving on into the second segment of the stream, where we're going to talk to all of y'all. It's incredibly fun. But of course, Matthew, I believe you have a comment.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And that was a very quick transition to the final question segment. But thank you very much, Enforcer.
I thought you had a comment about. Oh yeah, what's the big idea here? Hmm?
Oh no, I wasn't gonna say nothing about him. He's just out there enjoying the speech. That's all.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought you had some. All right. Well, with that, what we got, Matthew?
All right, so moving into the final question segment of the night, we have one poll to address, and it says, NATO bases in Germany are on high alert due to a potential threat, and is it due to imminent sabotage? 64% said yes, NATO knows of a sabotage plan, while 16% said it seems likely but I need more info, and 9% said no, it's probably an imminent attack. And honestly, on this one, I would have to say that it sounds to me like, once again, like we saw, I think it was like 2 months ago, the NATO bases were put on high alert then as well, and we learned that it was due to a sabotage plan that was just uncovered by intelligence agencies. So I'm with the 65%. I think that's probably what it is. Probably not an imminent attack. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say they probably know of a sabotage plan. Probably not an imminent attack. They're probably just taking necessary precautions to avoid the incident from actually happening in the first place. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the rest of the questions that we have tonight. And we have some very interesting questions. And what do we have, Matthew?
All right, so moving into our Super Chat segment, the final one of the night. After we grab our Super Chats here, we'll get some live chats afterward. But anyways, moving into our first one. This one goes to Susan Janowski, who puts in a very generous $50 donation. And thank you very much, Susan, for that support. And they said, it appears that there is a change in command in Ukraine with all the success.
And I'd have to agree, Susan Janowski. I'd have to say, it looks as though we can attribute a lot of these successes currently to Oleksandr Syrsky, although the drone campaign was started under Zelenskyy. And so you can kind of accredit any success with that to Zelenskyy because he was the one who let that program walk, so that way Syrsky could allow it to run. But as far as the border incursion into Kursk, I would say that this does appear to generally be a major success from Syrsky's command, at least at the moment. And so I would largely agree with you. I think all of the success is showing that the change in command may have actually been a pretty beneficial one, possibly. Maybe new mindsets, maybe new approaches to the war were actually needed, unlike on the Russian side where they end up saying, we need a new approach to the war, and they bring in a banker or like a bricklayer or something like that. But anyways, I hope that does address that well. I thank you so much once again for support, Susan Janowski, and having been here for an incredibly long time, watching this channel, enjoying it, and not only that, enjoying it enough to support us and help us to keep this thing running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible each and every single day. And so with that, thank you so much once again. With that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Steve T, who threw in a $50 donation as well. And huge shout out to Steve for also supporting the channel in a very big way. He said, why is Ukraine not moving demolition troops into Russia to enter Luhansk behind the lines to destroy resupply routes, and similar sea incursion into the south? And also radar versus many solar power cellular listening posts dropped by drone systems for targeting.
And a very interesting question, Steve T. I would have to say the reason why demolition troops aren't moving in is because demolition troops are not special forces. And for a unit to operate behind the lines, like to, for example, go to Luhansk, which is deep behind the lines, hundreds of miles away from any active area at the moment, or hundreds of miles away from Kursk, where the breaches happen, that would be pretty tough to do, because a unit like that has to be self-sustaining, meaning that it has to be of a small size, and not only that, it has to be very specialized and well-trained. And while engineering troops and demolition troops are well-trained, they're not trained to that degree. So the Ukrainians have sent in special forces units to conduct sabotage behind the lines, but as far as we know, they do not involve any actual engineering troops, and I think that that would be generally a bad idea. Most of those engineering troops will probably get killed due to a lack of training and a lack of commitment to the plan. And not only that, considering that they're probably having to blend in with the civilian population, if they're ever captured, they're going to be treated as spies. They're going to be executed on the spot because that is allowable in the rules of war. And so, going off of that, I would generally have to say that, as far as I would understand it, they have sent in demolition teams in the form of special forces, but we're probably not going to be seeing any larger numbers of forces or units beyond that. But I will say, let's see, a similar sea incursion into the south, also radar versus many solar power, cellular listening posts. Okay, so now I know what you're saying with that. So what Steve T is talking about is that way back at the beginning of the war, Ukraine actually outlined how they've been detecting a lot of these Shahed drones flying through Ukraine. They had pretty much a microphone, or a large amount of microphones from phones set up in different areas, and they would be recharged with solar panels. But if any of these phones picked up the sound of a drone or a specific frequency of noise, they would detect that as an incoming air target, and they will report that back to a central kind of an air defense headquarters, where they could then triangulate the exact location of that drone and then have anti-air defense units go out and shoot it down. From what we know, it's a wildly effective way to deal with the Shahed drones because, one, Shaheds usually fly low enough, at least in the Ukraine war, they generally don't get picked up on a conventional radar. And so for that reason, it's actually way more effective than a radar system, at least at those altitudes, trying to detect those drones. So in that single instance, I would say that the cellular systems, or the cellular microphone systems, are actually pretty efficient and pretty effective at what they do. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, Steve T. Very interesting questions and some very interesting answers. And I hope I was able to answer that fairly well. And of course, huge thanks to you once again. I hope that was the best answer I could possibly give. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next here, we have a $42 super chat from Bubba Conway. And thank you very much, Bubba, for that $42 support. We appreciate it very much. He said, woohoo, LSA, Slav Ukraine.
And woohoo, man, you know what? Hang on.
You're going to find that clip of that guy going, woo, woo.
No, man. Instead, I'm going to go, Wahoo! Because this is the name of an actual submarine in World War II, was the USS Wahoo.
Oh. I see.
Dude, imagine getting capped by the USS Wahoo. Like, man, it's like the shame behind that one, man. Did this thing actually sink anything? Let's see here. Third patrol. Let's see. Dang, well, actually, it did. It actually sank some type of a Japanese destroyer. Imagine being a Japanese sailor and finding out after the war you got killed by a submarine called the Wahoo. Like, you know, it's like,
that would suck.
Dude, I guess when you actually successfully torped an enemy vessel, everyone on the ship went, "We got him, Wahoo!" And then they went back to their like positions and just kept working. I don't know, but still, beyond that, I gotta say, what a fun time on this little submarine right here. But still, nevertheless, I do have to say, thank you so much once again for support, Bubba Conway, and woohoo! And we will make sure to say LSA It's Slava Ukrainian. Thank you so much as well for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you who help to make this thing possible each and every single day. I got to thank you so much for that, because if it wasn't for folks like you, Bubba, who really enjoyed this channel and found it worthwhile to support it and help it to keep on running, we wouldn't be able to do this thing day in and day out. And so a massive thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, Jack pointed something out. They said, I don't think any of those sailors would have found out they died by the Wahoo. I don't think they would either. I think they'd kind of be dead. They would never know. But anyways, moving on. I wasn't going to say nothing about that, but I saw Jack saying it, made me almost lose it, so I had to mention it. But
you know, Matt, the survivors from sinking ships all picked up, you know? Like, you know that, right?
I do, but I don't think they're going to figure it out if they're dead, though. I think they're going to be sort of in mystery about that one.
Well, as they're floating up to the pearly gates, Matthew, like they sit there and get told you were killed by the USS Wahoo, and they went, the what? Like the what? But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to William P., who puts in a $30 donation, and thank you very much, William, as well for that support. He said, will the Antonov AN-225 Miria ever be rebuilt?
They want to rebuild it. I don't know if it ever really will be, though. There's apparently like a sister fuselage that was made, or a sister airframe that was never really fitted out to fly. So we think that at some point it will be rebuilt. I just don't know when, and I think that's on the lower priority end for Ukraine right now, because I think they're just focusing on, fighting the war, and then they'll focus on rebuilding the AN-225 probably way later after the war, maybe years later, possibly. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can at the moment. We don't really know a lot about what's going on with the Antonov 225. They have said they rebuilt it in the past, but we haven't really ever seen them revisit that idea or that topic for that matter. But one thing that is kind of cool about the Antonov 225, and let me see if I can let's see, how many of these things? One was built, and it apparently was built to carry the Buran, the Soviet space shuttle. That was a ripoff of ours that everyone claims was better, but which one kept on flying? Ours did, baby. The Soviet Union can kiss it. But still, I don't know about the Buran. Look at that. It literally is just a space shuttle ripoff. Like, everything about it. Space shuttle ripoff.
It really is, man. I'm going to tell you what. You know what? Something is interesting, though. Like, we can't get our own people off the space station because of Boeing right now. Isn't that kind of sad? I was just sitting here looking at that thinking, I wonder if we're going to turn to a foreign country to try to get them off of there like that, like maybe Russia even. And I wonder if they'd even get them off the space station at this point.
And then you have the Artemis program. They're working with Boeing to create a space vehicle that can bring people back to the moon. It's like, maybe we should go with another provider. It's like, maybe. Like, it's like, we were having some issues at the moment. But let me see here really quickly if I can show you all the Artemis rocket. Here we go. Here's Artemis 1, which is an SLS, I believe is what it's called. But I believe they're actually planning on using these later on for trips to Mars as well, if I'm remembering this correctly. Let's see here. 4 astronauts, Lunar Gateway. 2 astronauts. Let's see here. Well, dang, are y'all going to tell me where this will go? Okay, anyways. Y'all get the idea. Astronauts are stuck. Things ain't going too well, and Boeing ain't really doing that great. But still, beyond that, I will say, Antonov 225 will eventually be rebuilt, but the Buran, which this thing was built to carry, that thing is garbage. Also, isn't it kind of sad that the Soviet Union is was so strapped for a really powerful aircraft, unlike us, because when we had to move the space shuttle around, we would just load it on top of a Boeing 747 and go flying it around the country. Isn't it kind of sad that they had to go and build an entire purpose-built plane to move around their space shuttle because there was no aircraft in the Soviet Union that actually had enough thrust or power to move around their version of the space shuttle? Isn't that kind of sad? Doesn't that show like their economic inability and their deficiencies in their normal day-to-day lives and the economic stagnation and decline that was starting to reach the Soviet Union by this time, around 1988, just a few years before the Soviet Union would collapse? Isn't that sad? Isn't that terrible? I think it is. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running.
Yes, indeed. And moving on to our next one here, we have a $20 super chat from 300 Ghost once again, the second support of the night. And thank you very much, 300 Ghost, for that support. They said LSA and shout out to the community and Slav Ukraine and smash that like.
And thank you for the massive support, 300 Ghost tonight, and helping this channel to keep on running. And LSA, and a big shout out to the community. Community requires an amazing shout out. It is one of the most incredible, one of the most nicest, most well-rounded communities out there on the internet. It's truly incredible, and I gotta say that it's absolutely wonderful to know that that community is a part of this channel. And so a huge shout out to all of y'all in the Lee Spring Army, the best community on the internet by far. And I got to give you all a big thanks once again for being here with us tonight. I got to thank you so much, 300 Ghosts, for your first super chat. That was actually your first super chat ever to this channel. And thank you for giving a huge shout out to the community. And of course, Slav Ukraine, and hit that like button if y'all want to, because we're up to 3.1 thousand likes just about at this point. Can we get higher? I'm sure we can. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have another super chat from Bubba Conway, who put in a $21 donation this time. And thank you, Bubba, once again for that second support. And I just looked and realized he's got the Bubba Gump shrimp thing as his profile picture, by the way. That's pretty cool. I like to see it. He said, no problem. Just pay Elon less money. He'll send the dragon.
You know, I feel like that's probably what it should come down to at this point, because if the Dragon capsule works, just send up an automated one that connects to the space station, and then just have those guys load into it, and they're on their way back immediately. We don't have to reach out to the Russians or the Chinese or anybody to get them back. We get our own guys back because we're Americans, damn it. And that's what we do. It's simply what we do. But isn't it kind of weird, though, Matthew, that due to the lack of funding that NASA's gotten in recent times, we've ended up having to commercialize space travel, and there's actually different competitors like Boeing and SpaceX that are provided contracts to deliver astronauts to and from the space station, and also deal with waste and resupply and stuff like that. Like, that's pretty wild to think about.
You know, oddly enough, I remember that debate way back in the day. People were talking about, would it be better if the space industry was privatized, or would it be better if NASA kept, spearheading everything? And a lot of people were like, oh, if we have like competition and stuff like that between like the big mega corporations, we'll have more like innovation and stuff like that happening. But yet here we are right now with one company who can't get the people off the space station right now, and nobody's really willing to pass the torch over to like another one like SpaceX or something like that to let them handle it. They're really not willing to do that. So it's like, with government contracts, there's always going to be some level of like favoritism and stuff going on, and it may not go necessarily to the person that's the most innovative. It's just going to be the person with the lowest bid. So I don't know. I think the commercialization of the space situation, it has its perks, but also right now we're seeing some of the cons of it.
Also, Razor58 said Boeing spacesuits won't interface with SpaceX hardware. If that is the case, then I would say that there should be a law passed through Congress that requires the standardization, much like in the auto industry, there's a standardization of how cars run. There should be a standardization in how you can drive a car. Like every single car is going to have the gas pedal and the brake in the same spot, along with the steering wheel. You're not going to get any kind of wacky or wonky configurations with that nowadays. It's standardized. They should standardize space technology to where all of it can be interfaced and compatible with each other, just in case if something was to happen. Because that's not really a great thing when you say, oh, like, if anyone was about to die, we have to be the ones to save them, our company, because otherwise the other company's hardware can't interface with ours, and so they'll die anyways. Like, that's not really a good thing to put out there, and so I feel like a standardization should be required by statute at this point, because standardization is very important in every single facet of life these days. Most people don't even recognize it because it's such a normal thing. Like power outlets inside of y'all's houses. Here in America, those are standardized. The power outlets are the same everywhere. And so if you started to change it, you're going to have a whole bunch of incompatible power products in different regions of America that can't be used elsewhere, making things just wildly more complicated on a logistical and supply chain end of things. And so, much like everything else has been standardized, we need to standardize the compatibility of space equipment, because if it's going to be privatized competition, there has to at least be some compatibility involved up there, because, of course, the non-compatibility kind of breeds the competition and is supposed to knock out their competitors, but at the same time, that could be potentially putting people's lives at risk. And so there's a bit of a balancing game to be weighed there, and of course, the safety of the people involved will always outweigh the competitive nature of these companies. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. But still, that is incredibly annoying to hear. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one. I don't know why in the world I had like a whole hard drive reset right there, but we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next one here, we're actually going to address the poll, which has been up for about, I think, like 30 seconds or something like that. But the question is, should NASA spearhead the space race or private U.S. companies? And it looks like, preliminarily, about 57% said NASA and 43% said private companies. And honestly, I would say this. I think that NASA should take it back over completely and take charge of it, and also the U.S. government give funding back to NASA to actually have a space program, because with NASA being the one spearheading it, the government gets to take the credit for it more so than private companies when they handle it. And really, the space race was a large source of national pride when we were making strides in that, because NASA was in charge of it. So I think for purposes of morale for the country and things like that, and also just pride in the government, I think NASA should take it back over again. It may slow things down a tad because, of course, competition does spur more rapid progress, but sometimes that progress comes at compromise, and it also starts compromising the quality and also the safety of things, which is not good. So I think, like, for once, the government should actually take something back over, and NASA should take it back over. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to say, usually I'm a big fan of privatized competition. To be quite honest with most people, it actually ends up creating a lot of good things. But the thing is that with space exploration, to be entirely honest with y'all, competition doesn't really make sense in that category at the moment, because there's nothing to really compete for yet, if y'all get what I mean. Like, there's not an industry to be had in space where there's profit to be made. It's pretty much, like, if you want to look at it, there's no return on investment there. It's almost like throwing money into the wind. You give money to, like, it's not money wasted, because of course it's given to the people working on the project, and then they go and spend it elsewhere, here in the world, and the money cycles through the economy as usual, but there's no end to it. There's no logical end where we shoot up rockets, we mine minerals off of asteroids or something like that. There's nothing like that yet, and there probably won't be for a while. And so there isn't really a need to be competitive in that kind of a category yet. Sure, it will be later, but a lot of people are going to be disagreeing with that. I already know, and I'll explain. I'll add this kind of like as a historical thing. There was no privatized competition when we went to the moon. That was entirely done by NASA. We didn't go, okay, the 60s version of SpaceX, we need y'all to build a rocket that'll take us to the moon. No, that was entirely done by NASA. Of course, they coordinated with other companies to be able to make some things possible, like the computer technology in the Apollo capsule was made by IBM, as well as a lot of the ground control equipment as well was made by IBM. Some of the components inside the system were made by McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, but there was never a single company back in the day that just took over the entire thing. Like, Boeing did not build the Saturn V. They didn't design it either. The Saturn V was designed by Werner von Braun and his design team in Huntsville, here in Alabama, and then they commissioned the design. NASA was in charge of constructing it at the Redstone Arsenal up there in Huntsville, which has NASA facilities at it. They then took the Saturn V, loaded it onto a barge, shipped it down to the Stennis Space Center, which is in between Mississippi and Louisiana's border. They tested the engines, tested everything on them, made sure it was A-OK and was in running order. And then they took that entire rocket, the 3 stages it was in, and then they shipped it all the way around to Cape Canaveral, and then they got it set up, and then they launched it there. And that's how that worked. They didn't go, okay, private company, do this whole thing, or, let's compete. They didn't do that, and there really is no reason to do that yet. And to explain this in an even better context, back in the day when Christopher Columbus was the one who said, I'm going to sail west and try and reach India through the west instead of, traveling all the way around Africa, there was no privatized competition yet in that sphere. He was kind of like their version of NASA at the time. There was nothing to really be had out there. No one even knew if it was possible to sail to India out there. So a lot of people thought that because there was nothing out here, because of course people didn't think the world was flat, just putting that out there for y'all. They thought the world was a spherical object ever since ancient times. But something that they thought at the time was that there was nothing outside of Europe, Asia, and Africa. They thought there was nothing out here. It was just nothing but ocean. And there was no way in hell a ship would be able to sail that far and that long through nothingness without running out of stocks and supplies to make the voyage possible. And so Christopher Columbus, being a terrible mathematician like I would be, said that the Earth is actually shaped like a pear, and he could actually sail around and get to India a lot quicker. And so he did, and then he landed in America. He didn't even know that. He said it was, I believe he said it was the West Indies. And so then he died, and then they found out it was a whole new continent. But there was no privatized competition at that point. Privatized competition came after the discoveries were made, and they said, oh, there is something over here. Then you saw people like Hernando de Soto, and I believe, let me think of the others. Oh my lord, how in the world am I forgetting all the others? Let's see, we saw Fernando Magellan. I'm trying to think of Pizarro.
Martin Lopez.
Not Lopez. Not Lopez, man. I'm trying to think of all of them, but nevertheless, that's when the privatized competition began, was after they made the discovery and after there was an actual viability for competition at that point to discover new areas and to find new resources. And so, to answer that for y'all, and to use that as a historical example, right now we are kind of in a longer phase of the Christopher Columbus era of space exploration. We have not found out everything yet up there, and we haven't made it viable enough for this to be done pretty regularly, and for there to be any kind of privatized competition, because there's actually an end to competing up there. There's nothing out there yet for that, really. We're still conducting scientific exploration and discoveries at the moment. So I would say that I believe NASA should largely take it back over and run the entire thing, because otherwise we're seeing a whole bunch of weird rigmarole going on that really isn't getting anyone anywhere, and honestly a lot of it's just kind of maintaining the status quo. The only thing that looks like it may break the status quo is the Starship project run by SpaceX. That is starting to fall significantly behind original timetables. Like, by this time, according to the original timetable, they were supposed to be landing on the moon. They are still conducting suborbital tests on the Starship at this moment. And so with that,
they should just let the private companies like SpaceX and Boeing simply bid out for components like the engines or like parts of it, like the heat shielding or something like that. Let them bid for components and let NASA actually spearhead the whole design and stuff like that. Because, like I said, we're sacrificing safety at this point. I know some people were saying, well, look, NASA got some astronauts killed. And that is true. There was that one that blew up, and that obviously was not good. But at the same time, though, right now we're having an equally bad problem with the private companies operating it, because now the astronauts are stuck on the space station, which is obviously an embarrassment. So, I say give it back to NASA. That's just me personally.
Or we need to standardize. Like, if everything was standardized where it didn't matter whose rocket it was, like if someone was stuck up there, just say, okay, SpaceX, send a Dragon up and go grab them. And it was that easy, and everything was compatible with each other because it's all standardized, that would be one thing. But considering that honestly, Matty, I don't think NASA needs to necessarily take it back over. But I feel like there needs to be legislation passed where spacefaring technology is standardized. Like, sure, there can be like competitive edges and stuff, but as far as interfacing with the systems and using them, they should be standardized across the board, so that way an astronaut can hop in a SpaceX capsule and operate it much like they would a Boeing Starliner capsule or something else along those lines.
Yeah, maybe so. I think the bottom line is, I think the rocket should have NASA's name on it, and it should be considered NASA's rocket, and it's simply components of private companies that are used to build it. Because I just never have liked the idea of the private companies taking basically credit for the advancements in the country. There's nothing wrong with that, because private companies are the backbone of America. But when it comes to the space program in particular, and all the hype that's had over the history of the country, and like going to the moon was a huge deal and things like that, that was a huge deal with the government way back in the day. And now we don't really have that hype anymore because the private companies have it, and the government really can't take credit for it as much because of that. So I think just as a point of national pride, they should let NASA at least take credit for it and put their name back on the whole operation.
I would agree with that a little bit. I can see what people are saying though with private companies. I don't think competition in between private companies is too bad as long as it's not putting people's lives at risk. And now at this point, it does seem like there's a possibility for that. Like these people on the ISS are not going to die, but you could easily see where this starts going down the path. People could start dying because of non-standardized, like operational abilities and stuff like that. So I feel like as long as standardization is passed, this would generally be a non-issue. And of course, the United States can still take credit for it, even if a private company did it, because while it's a private company, it's still a private company from the United States.
Somewhat. Honestly, though, like when they say, "Oh, it's the SpaceX like Starship or something," that doesn't have the same ring to it as, "Oh, like NASA's sending a rocket back to the moon," meaning the government, like the U.S. is doing those. It sounds more like the U.S. like went out and paid some guys to go send something to the moon. So to me, it's a whole different like perspective on it, which is to me that's a pretty big deal. But I don't know if I'm alone in that, but I think it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, but like. I don't know, because then if you nationalize everything in the space industry again and they only bid to create components, then it would be an issue later on when you don't have to have that kind of nationalization about what would happen in the future. Because if it started to become an industrial pursuit, like say you started to resource mine on the moon or asteroids or anywhere else, does it need to be nationalized at that point? Is NASA now a for-profit company, or will we start to denationalize and allow for privatization of space and space exploration and also space mining operations? And then
But really, if we're being honest, though, space exploration isn't really a necessity. It's more of like a kind of like a. I mean, some people will argue it's a necessity, but in reality, in my head, it's more of like a feel-good thing. Like we're advancing and moving forward in something, and that's kind of like what going to the moon was. That really didn't accomplish anything in reality, except for we did it, and it was a huge achievement. But like for example, if we need things in the future from private companies, I'm sure they'll be around to use them if we want to. Like NASA can sub stuff out to them if they want. But I don't know. To me, I'm pretty firm in what I'm saying about that. I just think that space exploration is generally just for a feel good thing, and there's no need to get too efficient with it because rushing through it is not the point. It's just the point of making progress and having something to hope for, really.
Well, yeah, but you can make that same argument, though, for Christopher Columbus crossing the Atlantic. It's not anything to really do anything. It was just a feel-good thing. But then it ended up becoming very important in the future. Because, I mean, clearly with the world as advanced as it is, and considering that the world has been a never-ending story of constant expansion and growth, it would be obvious now that the next step is to start growing and expanding into space. Considering that we've done everything we can really on the surface of the planet. And so it probably is not just like a status quo, it is what it is kind of a thing. It probably is more so this is kind of the direction forward and where we're heading. Like, for example, what if we start to run out of viable, coal deposits aren't really anywhere out there, but what if we start to run, say, if the entire power grid in the future became nuclear, what if we started to run out of radioactive isotopes on the planet? Because it is possible, according to what we know, that at current consumption, we could run out of usable radioactive isotopes for nuclear reactors within 200 to 400 years, depending on different rates of consumption. That's not even increasing it. That's just keeping it at what it is right now. Considering that there's a large amount of usable radioactive isotopes on other planets or other celestial bodies out there that we could mine and harvest, space exploration in the future and space mining operations would probably start to become very important for the sustainment of the world itself.
Yeah, I mean, you can argue it's a necessity. To me, like really, honestly, I see a lot of people in the live chat actually disagreeing with me on this. It's something we need to work toward, but it's not like something we need to like start panicking and rushing toward. Like, oh, if we don't like go with the private companies and they shave down like a couple of years off the development, we should panic or something like that. To me, it's just not as important to rush it because, like for example, when Columbus came over and discovered everything over here, there was no rush in that. He simply came over here to look at it, and I think mainly he was coming over for monetary reasons, wasn't he?
Oh, no, he wasn't actually. He was just trying to find a new way to India. He wasn't like coming to America saying, I'm going to make a load of money. He was just like, I want to find a new route.
So he just stumbled across it, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. That was like that was the whole thing. Like he didn't like the truth is he died thinking he landed in India. Like he didn't even know that this was a new continent. It was other people after him who found out that that was a brand new continent, not India.
Oh, see, he wasn't rushing it either. He was just sort of like stumbling around. He didn't know where he was.
Well, no, he was. Well, that would require like a whole like rabbit hole to talk about. Like he was rushing it, and they were all kind of rushing it a little bit. But still, at the same time, it wasn't like. I don't know. I feel like this conversation is starting to go in circles at this point. But with that, I feel like, Matthew, we have a lot of Super Chat questions, and I've honestly lost my place in that conversation to even carry it on. But it was an interesting one while it was going on. I just don't even know where the hell we're going with it anymore, or where I'm going with it. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Evan Berger, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Evan, for that support. He said, "Thank you for all the work you do in keeping track of everything going on in this weird world that we live in. And I always look forward to your videos before I go to work. And slava Ukraine."
And thank you so much for the support, Evan Berger, and thank you so much for enjoying all the work we do and keeping track of everything going on in this weird world we live in. And I always look forward to you watching our videos before I stop working. And so I'm just kidding with you. Thank you so much for the support, Evan. And thank you so much for watching the videos. We put them out as often as we can. Lately, it's actually been getting a little slow as far as news coverage in the day. And so it's been hard for us to actually make short war videos, at least often or a lot. Today was one of those few days where we had insane amounts of news, and honestly, we could have made multiple videos just out of what happened today. But it's crazy to think that so many people have watched it. 305,000 people have watched the video that was put out today while I sit there and nearly hiccup right into the microphone. But beyond that, 305,000 people have watched the video that we put out today. And that's absolutely crazy because that's actually more people who have watched that video than we have subscribers. It's wild to see that because that actually happens a lot these days. And I got to thank you so much for being one of those folks that watches our videos because we put a decent amount of effort into those things and we love to know that people are enjoying them. And a lot more people actually enjoy those, at least in terms of raw numbers, than people enjoy the streams, weirdly enough. And our streams are some of the highest viewed ones in America. Like, if y'all don't believe me on that, I will show y'all. We're more watched than Fox News.
Wow.
Wow. Dude, the voice crack. And also, Matthew, now I want to say I want to say this, folks, really quickly. I'm not getting political when I show this, Matthew, because someone else was on air, apparently last night, with a stream while we were running one. What are you laughing at, man? You're like laughing all the time.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
I'm telling you, man, it's crazy. But anyways, beyond that, we were just a little bit above Fox News by a couple of hundred viewers. You can see CBS beat us by like 300 or so. But there was someone up there a little bit higher that, interestingly enough, they're a bit of a political figure. So when I show them, don't sit there and get political in the chat because we have a no politics rule still. But I did want to show you all how close we are to some other people. Right there, number 80, this guy.
Oh no, oh no.
10.7 thousand live viewers. We were number 88 with 10.1. So we were only 700, well, actually less than that. We were about 600 off from this guy. That's pretty weird.
Is that even the real deal? Like, it looks like some kind of weird account or something.
No, this is the real deal. I went and checked on it before. This is the official YouTube account for this person. And they go and post live streams of their rallies that they do. So, and people watch them. And so that's actually pretty wild to see. We're actually within pretty close distance of that channel whenever they go live. Like, that's really weird. And also, on top of that, we beat major news organizations like Fox News, and we're literally in brawling distance of all of the major mainstream news networks on YouTube. We're in the top 100 every day we go live these days. That's really weird to think about, and it's crazy to think that we've been doing this well. And so thank you so much for enjoying our stuff. We put a lot of effort into this. I love to know that people actually appreciate it and a lot of people watch our stuff, because nowadays we actually are giving mainstream news organizations on YouTube a run for their money. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Evanescent Wave, who throws in a $20 donation. And thank you, Evanescent Wave, for that support as well. They said ATACMS have been used in Crimea, and why can't Ukraine strike the Ukrainian side of the bridge?
That's an interesting question, Evanescent Wave. I don't know why, but I remember that the United States completely banned the Kerch Bridge from being hit back in the day. So I would not know exactly why they can't hit the Ukrainian side. I just remember that the entire thing was ruled as a no-go for attacks. But you are correct. ATACMS have hit Crimea before. Hell, and ATACMS actually hit the Rostov-on-Don submarine in Sevastopol and the Minsk Rapucha-class landing ship and ended up pretty much knocking out both of those. But still, I don't know why they rule out the Kerch Bridge. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Smog, who puts in a $20 donation and says, bada boom, news reporting today. And take one from the chat.
Hey! And thank you so much for the support, Smog, and helping this channel to keep on running. Thank you for enjoying the reporting that we've had. And thank you so much for enjoying the massive news we had, too. It was a really big day. And, of course, thank you so much once again. And we will make sure to take one from the chat. And what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the one from the chat is going to go to, let's see here, McName, who says, all these drone hits, especially the deeper ones, do you really think that they launch from Ukraine or from somewhere much closer to targets?
Let's see. I'm going to have to find that one and read it. Can you, let's see, all these drone hits? No, they do launch from Ukraine because some of these drones are incredibly large and they're built for range. So we do know that all of them are being launched from Ukraine. But we haven't seen any information to contradict that at the moment. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And I thank you so much once again, Smog, for the support and sponsoring that live chat and helping this channel to keep on running. But before I move on, Matthew, I saw a live chat comment I'm going to have to address right here. Someone said, that gives me hope in my fellow citizenry. Fox News caters to the ignorant. Okay, I don't know why you have to single them out, because I feel like CNN also caters to ignorance as well. I feel like both of them do. I feel like any politicized pundit kind of a mainstream news network is just pandering to ignorant people. Like I feel like that was kind of like a charged comment towards one side, and I would have to tell you, Matthew can tell you this as well, as a YouTube channel that has never picked a political side, and we've ended up being called fascists and communists by one side and the other, I find both sides generally to be very ignorant and very low in intelligence, or at least larger talking pieces out there. That's the reality behind it. Because if you think that Fox News is giving you the truth, or if you think CNN is giving you the truth, you've got to go get on something like some kind of a pill or something to help you out, because you got to be living in a delusional land if you think either of them are honest reporting of news. Both of them are the most politicized garbage you can ever find out there. It's the junk food of news. It's just a waste of time even listening to it. I don't like them. I don't really like any of the mainstream news networks. Very few of them are up to my standard of what reporting should be, because I'm not against having a bias. Like, for example, a pro-Western bias, which is the only one we emphasize on this channel, and we make it very open and transparent. We don't tell y'all, yes, we're telling the truth of the world. No, I say we're telling the truth as by a pro-Western mindset. That's what we say. But I'm not going to sit there and then start splitting hairs and saying, well, we're in this political party and we're this kind of a person, and start getting into this identity stuff that all of these groups do these days that it's just so stupid, and it's not at all within what news and journalism should be. Like, it's okay to have a pro-Western spin to news, in my opinion. That's the only spin I think is acceptable, because what else would you be? Anti-Western and or neutral, which in that general kind of a sense could end up being complacent and end up actually supporting or abetting enemy forces of the West, like Russia and China. So pro-Western and that kind of a spin, that's okay. But then getting into domestic political spins and then claiming that you're neutral and unbiased and only telling the truth, that is a load of hogwash to me. And I believe that is not at all a good thing. Like, I'm glad to see we're beating Fox. I hope, I didn't even see CNN on the register last night, to be honest, so I don't even think they showed up in the top 100, but I think we beat them as well. And I hope we did, because I don't really like heavily politicized mainstream news networks. That's just my stance on that sort of a thing. If they want to be journalists, they got to be objective and neutral, especially when it comes to domestic affairs. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Texicali74, who puts in a $20 donation. Thank you very much, Texicali, for that support. He said Semper Fi.
And Semper Fi, Texicali74. And thank you so much for being here with us again tonight. And thank you for supporting the channel and helping us to keep this thing running. Because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here right now saying the stuff we say and doing the stuff we do. And so with that, huge thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again.
Yes, indeed. And this one right here goes to Retail Mix USA 2.0, who puts in a $20 donation.
Hey!
Thank you very much, Retail Mix, for being a long-time channel viewer and for that support. They said Iceland may lose its top resort, the Blue Lagoon, and a very important power plant to the latest eruption that started today.
Really? The Blue Lagoon. The Goo Lagoon.
The Blue Lagoon.
the Goo Lagoon. But where the hell is it? The Blue Lagoon. Here we go. The retreat at Blue Lagoon. Is this that famous? It is that famous one, Matthew. Look at that.
That's pretty nice. How much does it cost to stay there?
Only $1,418 a night.
A night?
I think so. I think I'm reading that correct up there, right here.
Damn.
Damn!
What the hell? $1,500 a night? That is freaking crazy. Like, what are they giving you?
I guess the thermal baths, maybe, but I don't.
That's it?
I think so.
I'm just saying, it looks nice, but that seems like a ripoff.
I'm gonna say this: the volcano may destroy this place, but with how much they're charging per room, they should be able to rebuild this thing twice as big, probably, because that is insanely priced. This also looks bizarre, like right here, man. This looks like something out of like a 3D render.
Yeah, I couldn't see you paying $1,500 a night for that. If you just want to stay 3 days, man, that's like you're spending big cash.
Aw, man, I have to go help Ukraine out in Iceland. I need my viewers to support a fundraiser for me to go on this trip. I bet you that'll be next, dude. Like, after we've seen that will be next. But, I mean, you know...
What prevents you from showing up here and setting up a tent outside and just camping?
You know, that's a good question. Wait a minute, so this is $358 a night. Well, what is this? Okay, so this is more of a shack.
A lot cheaper.
Yeah, it's a lot cheaper, but at least compared to the other building, this is more like a shack for the peasantry. But still, it's way cheaper in like reality. And so we can see the geothermal power plant right here as well. That's pretty cool. And then the hotel is right up here by the power plant. Hey, that's great. Like, yeah, you're paying $1,418 a night to sleep next door to a power plant. That sounds pretty decent to me. I mean, hell, I would spend thousands of dollars a night, Matthew, to stay like 300 yards from a power plant, wouldn't you?
Nah, I'm afraid not. I had to save that.
Well, Matthew, if you didn't like that, we could always go to temporarily closed. What for? Oh, it must be the volcano, maybe. But where is this in Iceland? So it's actually not that far from Reykjavik, which is the capital of Iceland. That's not that far at all. So that's pretty interesting, actually, I gotta say. And so with that, I would have to say, very unfortunate to hear about that. Hopefully the power plant's not lost. The hotel is kind of collateral. If it gets lost, that will be a little unfortunate. But, you know, it honestly... Like, I can't really feel that sad for it, because I would never, even if we ended up getting millions and millions and millions of subscribers and just ended up selling our souls to, like, the devil or something, we still wouldn't have enough money to stay there for, like, a few days. Like, no joke. So, I can't really be that sad for it, because I would never get to go in there or hang out at it to actually get a feel for the place and know if I like it or not. But I would love to visit Iceland one day. Not that hotel, I wouldn't be able to afford it. But I would like to visit Iceland one day, because it is a really neat country. And we also have a couple of viewers from Iceland as well. But let's go look at Reykjavik. And what does it look like in there? That's one cool church. That's actually really cool. It's like a Minecraft church, dude. It's like, what is this?
Kind of interesting.
Man, it is kind of interesting. I will say that. But not a bad looking city at all. I would like to check out this place one day and take a good look at it. But I want to know who designed that roof right there, because that is the most Minecraft looking thing I've ever seen. And I know there are some people on this channel who would really appreciate that and might want to actually build this. And to y'all, more power to y'all. I hope y'all try, because I would like to see this thing for real in Minecraft if y'all want to make it. But beyond that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much for the support and sharing that interesting little fact with us, Retail Mix USA 2.0, because I didn't even know that that was going to happen. And so with that, thank you so much once again. We are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to William P., who puts in a 20. I believe this is the second support of the night, by the way. Huge shout out to you, William, for supporting us so very much. He said, does Ukraine not have the ability to conduct a seaborne landing in, let's say, Mariupol, and kind of like the U.S. did in Incheon in the Korean War?
Absolutely not. They do not have the ability to conduct an amphibious landing in Mariupol, because the entire Sea of Azov is controlled by the Russians, and so is the Kerch Strait as well. So if Ukraine ever wanted to try and conduct an amphibious landing, they would have to sail all the way around the Crimean Peninsula, being detected and probably under fire the entire time, somehow survive that, and then run the gauntlet of going straight through the Kerch Strait at full speed, try and not run on the sandbar with their vessels, and also survive the gauntlet of sailing through there, and then get into the entirety of the Russian-controlled Sea of Azov, and then make it to Mariupol, and then try an amphibious landing there. So largely that would be next to impossible, because they would have to fight their way all the way to complete destruction to even try and get to Mariupol in the first place. So right now they don't really have that ability, and on top of that, Ukraine really doesn't have a navy. So that is probably one of the biggest limiting factors, is that they don't even have anything really to lose, because they don't really have a navy in the first place. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for support, William P. But I wish they did. I wish they did have the ability to conduct a naval landing like Incheon in the Korean War, but sadly, they will never have that ability in the entirety of the war. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Live Laugh Toaster Bath. He puts in a $15 donation, and thank you very much, good sir, for that support. They said, for the Punch Powder Fund, I'm telling you what, it's back again. It's back. They said, can we get a pimp marmot for the folks and LSA?
And LSA. And I gotta say, a huge thank you so much to you, Live Laugh Toaster Bath. Thank you so much for supporting the Punching Powder Fund. And what's up, bitches? Oh, it's the pimp marmot.
Oh, hello, Governor. Would you care for a kilo of punching powder? It's for sale. Ask the Fly. He's a top customer.
I wish I could zoom in on this picture, man. Like, I can't zoom in because it's Canva. Yeah, so I just kind of have to look at it.
Wait, there's a zoom in thing right down there at the bottom. You see it? Look at that.
Yeah, but it's not like easy like Wikipedia where I just click on it and it zooms in, because I have to do this and then scroll down. You know, and it's not.
Oh man, you want some of that punching powder? Oh man, the kilo is too large of a quantity, but if we can break it down a little, I think I might be a customer.
Aw, man, are you okay with accepting a kilo and missing about 900 grams of the kilo? I may have used all of that. Sorry.
Oh, wait a minute. We need a safety break. Hold on a minute. We got to go over here and smoke a roach real quick.
And then he literally like smokes a roach, pulls out like an Uzi, and like smokes a roach on the street.
Oh, what the hell?
Man.
That was so random.
Man, well, I had to do it, man. We had to make it a little random. But beyond that, I would have to say thank you so much for the support. Live, laugh, toaster bath, and there is a little bit of pimp marmot right there. It's a wonderful thing to see. We love the marmot, we really do. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, and also so I said huge joint. Yeah, we made it comically large because it's a hot dog man who's the fly. So we wanted it to be as physically large as possible, the biggest blunt for the biggest loser. And so with that. That was a really blunt way to put it. No pun intended. But still, with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for the support. Live, laugh, toaster bath. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one is going to go to Dean London, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Dean London. They said for the holiday fund.
And thank you so much, Dean London, for supporting that holiday fund. We are going to go on a holiday really soon. Well, really soon is in weeks away. I don't know where we're going at this point, and I don't know how long we're really going to be going. Like, the longest we can go for is about 4 days, maybe 5. So we have to fit everything in within 4 to 5 days. So I've got to figure that out and how that will work. One thing that we have been thinking so far is to incorporate the Monday. So what I've been kind of working towards, this is kind of like my running plan right now, is that we're going to make a pre-recorded show on Sunday and then upload that as a premiere at 10 p.m. Eastern time, so that way we have our Sunday fundraiser, but it'll be a video, but it will run as a stream during the stream time slot. So that way we'll still be able to run our Sunday fundraiser. But by that point, we'll probably, I'm not really sure how that's going to work, but we'll probably be on our way to wherever we're heading for the vacation. And then Monday will be a vacation day. Tuesday will be a vacation day. Wednesday will be a vacation day. And then Thursday will be the last vacation day. And then we'll probably be running a stream come that Friday. And of course, Short War summaries and stuff will still be uploaded during that time if there's anything to upload a Short War summary for, like big enough news and stuff. But if there isn't, there's going to be no streams during that time, and then we return and the stream will start to run again on Friday, and then we'll get right back to our normal streaming schedule. That's at least kind of my plan right now. And we'll have to see how that really goes, and then we have to figure out when that even is really going to be, because we don't know. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Snow White said, "You'll be missed." And thank you so much, Snow White. Well, y'all will be missed too. I really enjoyed doing this. Absolutely love it to bits. And I don't want anyone to think that we're taking a vacation because, man, we're tired of this. I love this to pieces. I love doing it every day. I love talking on the stream. But there have been a series of things that have happened in the background, not necessarily attached to this channel. And I'm not really wanting to air out all of this stuff publicly. It's nothing really bad, or terrible or anything. It's just that kind of stuff in life where you end up dealing with some people and you end up getting just completely drained and worn out because of it. I've kind of been dealing with this sort of stuff behind the scenes the entire time I've been running this channel, but for some reason lately, it started to get me to where I'm kind of getting a little bit ground down feeling, where you just don't really feel like you have the same energy that you used to have, and, and now, because my family, Matthew, my mom, and all that, were wanting to take a vacation somewhere a little while ago, and they really started to push me for it. Now I started thinking about it and came around to the idea, a vacation probably would be a nice way to kind of recharge, so that way I can come back to this thing and just be perfectly A-okay and perfectly fine. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Someone said, "Oh man, the catfish situation." No, it's nothing like that. It's a whole other kind of a thing. It's something that I can't even really explain or go into on stream, not because no one would understand it. It's just kind of like one of those things where it's just kind of like a personal dealings you have with other people, and you don't really want to talk about those things that much on a public setting, because it's just kind of getting into life drama, and that's something that I think is, a little bit I'll diss on other YouTubers like Hot Dog Man on air. That's not really unprofessional, at least in my opinion, but talking about things like this in my own personal life, kind of a little unprofessional to me, and so I generally try and keep that a little bit on the down low. But with that, hopefully the vacation will be fun. We will recharge, and we will be back at it like lickety-split, just perfectly fine when we get back from that little trip. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. Thank you so much once again for support, Dean London, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Mike Sontag, who puts in the third ever super chat on the live stream, and he put in a $10 donation. And huge shout out to you, Mike, for that support. He said, "Mr. Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, you two are amazing." And thank you, Mike. I want to throw my mouse across the desk, but he said, "Enjoy some dinner, partially on me." And a question, roughly OPSEC-wise, where are you two enjoying your holiday?
Well, I thank you so much for the third super chat ever, Mike Sontag. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. As far as the OPSEC thing goes, we don't really want to say exactly where we're going, but there are some ideas. That's a tough one to answer, because the honest thing is that the whole we've got really crazy haters out there that are that will try and get us injured or killed at any chance they get. And on top of that, now from what we understand, we're also on some kind of an FSB hit list in Russia. It makes us a little bit leery to share a lot of details about where we would end up going. And so I can't really say specific details, but I will give a general direction. So as many of y'all know, we are in Birmingham, Alabama. That's where the LSA HQ is, where we are. We're either thinking of going west or going northeast, one or the other. Just kind of throwing out entire geographic areas of America. So we will see which one ends up happening. The truth is that we're not really sure, and if a decision can't be reached, both of them will happen at the same time for the large part. But that's what we're thinking right now, either west or up towards the northeastern kind of an area. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can without getting too much into the OPSEC side of things, because I feel like it's fine to say general massive geographic locations of America, but not specific areas. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for support, Mike Sontag, and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you so much for saying that we're amazing, having some really kind words. And we will enjoy a full dinner on you, but the other dinner will not be provided. So I will starve. Matthew will have a dinner. I will starve, because a good dinner costs about $10 these days. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang, who puts in a $10 donation. Thank you very much, AMX10, once again for that support. They said this expanded front line, which I assume the Ukrainians were prepared for, is a beautiful dilemma for Russia's military. And my question is, will Ukraine make an incursion into Belarus and call their bluff?
And I gotta thank you so much for support, AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang. And I'd be entirely honest, I don't think that the Ukrainians will ever conduct an incursion into Belarus, because it doesn't really draw the Russians anywhere. It just draws the Belarusians into the war, which would start to pose some problems for Ukraine in the future that they may have not calculated or accounted for at the moment. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. But I would say that the expanded front line in the Kursk certainly is something the Russians did not want, and it's really starting to screw them over a good deal as well. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Ambi Pambi, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much for that support. They said, I think more than 8% of listeners are female, aka Lisa's. And they are just signed on with their menfolk.
Maybe so. Maybe so, Ambi Pambi. That's probably a good point. Because we do know that a lot of, like, individuals became couples later on, like entire couples are now watching on singular accounts. So the LSA viewership probably is a bit higher than 8% of the viewers being women and the rest of them being men. So it probably is way on up there. I'd say maybe like around 13-14% maybe, which is pretty freaking big when you think about it. But still, thank you so much for the support, Ambi Pambi, and I'd have to agree with you. I think it is more than 8%, but we only can work off of what YouTube provides. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Richard Philpott, who puts in a $10 donation. Thank you, Richard, as well. He said, times are a bit tough in California at the moment, but the next month's rent is paid, so take one from the chat.
And I thank you so much for the support, Richard Philpott. Things are kind of tough over a lot of America these days. Things are just a little bit difficult. Some people will say they are, some people will say they aren't. You know, I guess it's up to interpretation. Some people have it a little bit easier in some tough times. Some people have it tougher. But I got to say, thank you so much for the support, Richard Philpott, and helping this channel to keep on running. But please make sure that you only support this channel if it's not putting yourself in any kind of a tough spot. We never want viewers to put themselves in tough spots supporting this channel, but still, I thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we will make sure to take one from the chat. And so what do we got, Matthew?
And this one from the chat is going to go to Nicholas Condor, who says, so the Russians are building bomb shelters to protect their people from Russian bombs? Question mark.
Yes, apparently so. I mean, that's probably an interesting way of looking at it. Maybe so. And so, yeah, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. Thank you so much once again, Richard Philpott, for supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running and sponsoring a live chat. And with that, we are about to move on to the next one. But before we do, I saw something really quickly. Matthew addressed it, but I'm going to address this as well. I don't know what it is with people coming into our live chat every once in a while, and mentioning the names of other YouTube channels and promoting them here in our live chat, because I don't know if y'all know this, but that is generally very disrespectful. I don't really want people doing that for us on other channels, because that's their, like, whether we have any dealings with those channels or not, and whether we like the people running them or not, that is their channel, and they put their own amount of work and effort into it to get to where they are, and it doesn't really seem nice for people to, like, travel around and try and mooch folks to other platforms and stuff. It actually seems, well, it's not seems, it actually is pretty rude and disrespectful. Like, if you like that channel, that's great. If other people want to, if you want other people to find it, go post it on your Instagram or your Facebook. But don't come into our live chat trying to promote another YouTube channel, because that's pretty rude to us, because we put in a lot of effort into the show. I mean, I work hours in advance on this show, making sure that it's ready to run, not so that way someone can come in here and say, hey, by the way, this guy's better, go watch him. That's really rude. And so with that, hope that does address that well. Saw that for a second, I was like, I don't even know why people do that. And also, I want y'all to know, if y'all enjoy this channel, when I tell y'all to spread the word around, I don't really mean go to other YouTube channels in their comment sections or in their live chats and say, hey, this guy sucks, go watch The Enforcer, because that is so rude. That is unbelievably rude. And if you want to promote this channel, like, do it on your Instagram, your Facebook, your Snapchat, something like that. Like something that you control, where you can spread the message as yourself, instead of, hopping on some other YouTuber's platform and tearing them down and then trying to promote us, because that always comes off as not that great. It comes off as pretty rude. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Lazarus7049, who puts in a $10 donation and says there's no reason to take the city of Kursk, just threaten it enough to generate tens of thousands of refugees, and that these refugees will cause political pressure on Putin.
And that's
me personally, I won't go through the whole rabbit hole again. I would say that Ukraine really does have a reason to take Kursk. I'm not sure if they'll be able to pull it off in an acceptable time period or not, but if they could take it, they would certainly want to take it, at least in my opinion. But I think the Enforcer disagrees with that, but I think they would probably want to take it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, I actually think that's a pretty decent assumption. That's what the Ukrainians are currently doing right now, and it doesn't really seem like it's producing a lot of domestic pressure on Putin at the moment. But, we'll eventually see if it happens or not. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so the next one, while I grab a super chat real quick out of the live chat, the next one is going to go to Monsieur Gaston, who puts in a $10 donation and says, wahoo, marmot time.
Wahoo! But let me go grab the normal marmot really quickly. Hang on, let me go grab it. Oh, hello there!
Oh, hello, Governor. Welcome back, Governor.
Oh, hello there! Would you like a plum? Or a rock? Or would you like that? Oh man, I would like to not get flipped off and be treated like shit by everyone I run into, because I'm so freaking hard to get along with, even at a first glance. Oh man. Wow, what a right torso. But beyond that, thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. Monsieur Gaston. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to CK Bold, who puts in a $10 donation. And they thank you very much for the usual, by the way. And CK Bold said, take a live chat question. And we shall. And the live chat, in honor of CK Bold, goes to You Don't Know. And I hope we do know. Now, they said, whatever happened to the North Korean Combat Engineer Brigade?
Whatever happened to that brigade? We don't know. They just never showed up, and we've never gotten any updates on them. I'm honestly thinking that they may have been a fictitious creation of the Russians and the North Koreans that never would actually materialize. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again, CK Bowl, for sponsoring our live chat and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Battler1975, who puts in a 10 and says, for the chewing gum fund for the drive.
Hey, who said we're driving? Who said we're driving? Battler? I mean, there's so many ways to go. You could go by boats, you could go by plane, you could go by train. I mean, there's so many ways to get places here in this beautiful grand republic of ours. There's just unlimited abilities. It probably would be the car, though. Like, you're not gonna lie. So thank you so much for the support and supporting the gum fund, because you got to have a lot of chewing gum for trips like that. Specifically Hubba Bubba. I'm just kidding. We use like the Mentos, but still, with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to HBO Matt, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, HBO Matt. They said a federal judge in Kansas has ruled during a criminal trial for possession of a machine gun that machine guns are legal and protected under Bruin.
Interesting, HBO Matt. Matthew, is that you, but from HBO?
Ah, man, I'll tell you what, that ain't me.
Man, I'm telling you, that's interesting to hear. I think if I'm correct, that will probably only apply, and if this is correct, Matthew, that will only apply to the district that ruling was made in, if that's correct.
I think that sounds accurate, but honestly though, I'm not really sure. I think this might be a crap show going on with this thing right here because the ATF creates federal rules. Then you have a federal judge saying that the machine gun's legal and protected. I don't know. Like it's really right now it's so chaotic with like what's actually acceptable, who's making rules, who's enforcing rules and whatnot. I don't have any idea at this point. I don't know.
I wouldn't really know either, to be entirely honest. It's a very complicated kind of a system that works around the ATF with how a lot of their I think it's executive regulations, if that's the correct word, are created, and how those kind of interact with the rest of the judicial system, or really the legal system for that matter. It's a little bit more complex, and so I wouldn't really know a lot about it to say, oh, that's cool. And also on top of that, I don't think that is deeming the 1986, the National Firearms Act of 1986 unconstitutional. I think it's just saying that you don't have to. Well, then again, I mean, that's pretty well, that court case right there, if we were to take that at face value, that is saying that apparently it's not an illegal possession of a machine gun because you don't have to have a tax stamp to possess a machine gun, which that not only throws out the National Firearms Act of 1986, I believe that also throws out the National Firearms Act of 1932 as well, which was the original act that made it to where it was a requirement that you had to have a tax stamp to be able to own a machine gun. So, I'll have to go back and look into that a little bit. I don't really know if I can here soon because there's a lot going on behind the scenes nowadays that we're trying to tend to and take care of on the business and side of things and everything else. But that is interesting to hear because, like, for example, the Supreme Court agreed with that. That means that, hell, I mean, you could go out and buy a machine gun at that point like you could any other kind of a normal rifle, probably with just a simple Form 4478 background check and no tax stamp or anything else along those lines. If that is the case, I think that is actually kind of cool. Like, I'm not gonna lie, because, there are many kinds of collectibles out there that I would like to try and get my hands on one day, and they would be a lot cheaper at that point too, because there wouldn't be like this whole like weird collector's world that is built around the rareness of these machine guns, because you have to have a tax stamp for them and they have to be made before 1986. But anyways, with that,
oh, and also let's see, I have to address this out of the live chat real quick. I saw Riddle Me This say wrong at Enforcer Matt. The ATF is only supposed to enforce the laws and not create the laws. That is the way that it ought to work, but that's not the way it really does work, because when the ATF starts passing these federal regulations that they've come up with themselves about certain rules about pistol braces and things like that, all these other rules and stuff like that, those are rules being created by people that were not elected. The people in the ATF were not elected there. So, the laws are supposed to be created by elected officials that we elect to put there, but the ATF doesn't really operate like that. So they do enforce it. They're responsible for enforcement of the firearms regulations, and they also create them as well. So, that's a whole, like, possibly political argument there as well, which I won't get into, but, I'm just not a fan of that.
Also, I'm seeing a lot of people saying some stuff, like Terrence Custer brought in a very interesting statement. And actually, Terrence Custer actually hit on what I was about to say, too. He said, courts even say that training for gun ownership isn't constitutional. Most gun owners think that's crazy. Me, personally, as an owner of loads of firearms, I find it to be a little bit bizarre that some people get firearms and they have absolutely no training. And some of these people are like, I'm going to be very frank. Some of these people are really stupid and they're going to get themselves hurt or someone else hurt. But the fact of the matter is that requiring certain kinds of training, it creates this kind of an issue about what amount of training is sufficient. And then if you were to leave that decision up to the states, some state governments that are not necessarily a big fan of firearms could make the kind of training needed extremely expensive, or extremely time consuming, or completely impossible to do because of a combination of the two. And so then you would see that not a lot of people would own firearms, or in some other states, the amount of training you would need would literally be a joke. Like, you literally just get told by someone at the gun store how to operate the firearm. That's it. And then you have a large amount of gun ownership there. And so then, because of that, you start running into massive differences in how it's regulated for the large part, and then that could end up becoming a massive issue in itself, because some people, although constitutionally you're allowed the right to own a firearm as long as you have the proper amount of training, the proper amount of training is defined differently in different places, and therefore the accessibility to the firearms is massively different, and you may as well be denied the right to own the firearm because of the hurdles you have to climb through to get to that point. So that's kind of the reason why they generally go down that kind of a route when they say, like, training and stuff like that is unconstitutional, at least in that measure. But I would say it's a very interesting thing when we talk about, like, firearms, because back in the day, firearms were completely unregulated up until about the 1930s. And this is something that a lot of people don't know either. All the way up until 1986, it was pretty easy to go out and buy a machine gun. No one really did, though, because, like, who needs to own a machine gun? The reason why the modern gun world is so geared and oriented towards semi-automatic rifles styled after assault rifles, or for that matter machine guns and such things like that, is because there was a decent effort to try and restrict the public from owning those. And because it becomes restricted, it becomes something people want to pursue, because, you know, it's a rare thing. It's cool because it's either tough to get them, or it's very rare, or something along those lines. And so really, through the passing of legislation over time, gun culture changed massively in America. It went from hunting rifles, you know, and things like that, to people really did, like, everyone wants an AR, everyone wants an AK, or something along those lines, because it's cool, it's coveted, and it became really popular and popularized, at least in the mainstream mindset, because of all of the hoopla surrounding them. If no hoopla surrounded them, those would have never become popular, because they didn't become popular really up until the national firearms ban in the 90s, when what was called by the government assault rifles were banned. That's really when ARs became wildly popular. Until then, they weren't really much of anything that anyone really wanted. But with that, I hope that does kind of address that well. It's a very interesting little conundrum there. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so this one right here goes to Uncovered Cube, who puts in a 5 and says, "To the best news team, enjoy the vacation and LSA."
Hey, and thank you so much for wanting us to enjoy the vacation, Uncovered Cube. Hopefully we will, and hopefully we'll have a lot of fun with it. And thank you so much once again for the support, and thank you for the kind words as well. Of course, long live the Leaf Spring Army, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Mr. Tampico, who puts in a 5 and says, "Any thoughts for doing a call-in hour, and thanks for all you do." Oh no, a call-in hour, that would be tough. Have y'all seen how that goes on C-SPAN? Like, that goes rough, like terrible things being said on the air. I don't know about that, but Enforcer, what say you?
Oh no, we're never doing a call-in. I'm so sorry, Mr. Tampico. I would love to do that, but you could get some wild card people, and with YouTube, they don't care if that was us or not. They will strike us. Like one of the most common things that happens on C-SPAN is for people to get put on the call, and then they just start blurting out as many racial slurs as they can before they get hung up on. That would get us striked every single time on YouTube that would happen. And so we would literally be playing Russian roulette with the entire channel doing something like that, because if we bring someone on and they do something like that, that stream is immediately going to be striked for a community guidelines violation, and there wouldn't really be a way for us to appeal that because it happened on air. So it would be a cool idea, but YouTube's rules and the way they enforce them would make it impossible for us to do that with good faith. Or let people get on in good faith, because that would be abused pretty quickly, and we would get in a lot of trouble, even if it was a third party that we had brought on, not knowing that they would do that. But still, an interesting idea. Not a bad one, but due to the risks, we could not do that. And so thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, huge shout out to Marc-Andre Brunette for putting in a 5, and also shout out to Darren Quinn for putting in a 3. And thank you both, Mark and Darren, for that support and helping to keep the channel running. And we also have a 5 from Super Action General, who said, I love the channel in the LSA, and shout out to our active duty folks and veterans in the LSA. And also, can we get that Pimp Marmot?
Hey, thank you so much for the support, Super Action General. And we did get that Pimp Art Marmot earlier tonight. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, big shout out to all of the active duty and veterans of the Lee Spring Army. About a third of y'all are active duty or veterans, one or the other. And I got to say, that is wild to think that so many of y'all are. It's a third of our entire Lee Spring Army is actually made up of veterans and former serving. Well, veterans and former serving are the same thing. Veterans and actively serving. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support. I got to thank you for being one of those active serving Super Action General. I'm not going to say in what branch and what unit, but still, I thank you so much for the support and being here with us and really enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Wyatt Logan, who puts in a 5 and says, hi, Enforcers. When's the next merch drop? And we're all proud of the job you two are doing. And thank you, Wyatt. He said, excellent reporting and the short war summaries and LSA.
And LSA, baby! And I gotta say, the next merch drop, we don't really know. We haven't actually worked on one for a bit because we were wanting to give the last one a bit of a rest. But we don't know. Matty, do you have an idea of when you would want to do another merch drop? We haven't even talked this out behind the scenes for a while now.
I would say it's about a month away.
Yeah, probably about a month away. We have some things that we have to tend to in the background too, in between here and then, that would make it really difficult to pull one off in a few weeks. But we probably will have another one coming in a few months' time. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support, Wyatt Logan, and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this possible. And LSA, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Razor58, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Razor, for that support. We appreciate that. And no comment to address. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you so much for the support as well, Razor58, because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Kyle Hayes, who puts in a 5 and says, NASA is slow at building rockets, and they have spent billions on SLS only for delay after delay after delay, and SpaceX is the future.
That's an interesting point, Kyle. I actually saw you in the live chat. You were going to town, in support of privatized space exploration and space companies, and I'm sure, and I think there's a good argument to be made there for sure, because SLS has been falling behind, but at the same time, the Starship's also been falling behind. I think that may just be kind of like a common industry standard in the rocketry world, is that usually everything just ends up falling behind and also over budget, because I believe the Starship is also starting to reach over budget at this point as well, if I'm remembering correctly. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Kyle, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Jack Ray, who puts in a 5. He says, for the punch and powder fun, and everybody has a plan until they get the punch and powder in the nose.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's true.
Aw, man, but he puts it in his nose. Aw, man. Oh, but beyond that, I gotta say, thank you so much for the support, Jack Ray, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I like that. That's a pretty funny one. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Colin Mekamenemi. I hope I said your name properly. They put in a 10-pound donation, and thank you very much, Colin, for that support. They said this vacation isn't to Kursk for some sort of wild series of on-the-ground reporting in the lead-up to the 1,000th day of the war, by any chance. Kidding. But enjoy. You guys diverse it.
Deserve it.
Deserve it.
Man,
We said diverse.
We're going to diversify. I like it, but still, I thank you so much for the support, Colin, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for saying that we enjoy we deserve a vacation, because I don't ever feel like we really deserve anything. I'm never a mindset of anything's owed to us, because throughout our entire life, it's been made very clear to us that no one owes us anything, and we don't really have much of anyone to count on. That's kind of been a reoccurring thing that's been drilled into our heads over and over, and so we kind of have that mindset going into things. And so I hate to say stuff like we deserve something or we're owed something, because the reality is that, at least to me, we're not we're not owed anything by any of y'all. Y'all don't have to give us a single thing. But nevertheless, y'all do, and we are entirely grateful for that. That's probably why we go over the top, unlike others who are on YouTube, for thanking y'all and really letting y'all know we appreciate y'all, your support, y'all watching, y'all hitting the like button, because we go through life expecting that no one owes us anything. We're not people who think that everyone owes us something because we're these precious little lilies. You know, like, that's a ridiculous way of thinking. That's kind of the way a lot of people think, which I find really gross. But, you know, can't change others. We can only do what we do. But I still thank you so much once again. And no, we will not be going to Kursk. We won't be going to Ukraine, that's for sure, because I don't really like the idea of vacationing in an active war zone. You know, it just seems to me to be a little immoral, considering that it's kind of an indulgent thing, and I don't really like indulging myself at the disservice of many others, in fact, by their lives. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Leora Avagile, who puts in a 5 and says, "Hey Enforcers, you guys are killing it tonight, and I hope you guys stay safe and keep on going on. And Hot Dog Man, eat your heart out, LOL."
And I thank you so much for the support, Leora. Is it Avagile or Avagile?
I think it's Avagile.
I feel like we're getting that wrong. Like, I don't know how. I feel like it's either Leora, she corrected this last time too. It's Leora Avagile or it's Leora Avagile, and for some reason I can't remember. Please correct us in the live chat, Leora, whichever way it's pronounced. We're gonna get that down eventually. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, and thank you for saying that we killed it tonight. We tried our best. It looks like a little convention rained on the parade. What can we do about that, though? I mean, there's not much. But I still thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who have made it possible to keep this channel running and make it possible. And I don't think Hot Dog Man is going to be eat your hearts out, because he is off on his own stupid escapade right now, failing miserably at it. So I love it. Me personally, I think he ought to do more content like that. Maybe his channel will die quicker, but you know, still, like, from a neutral perspective, terrible for him. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Elka Sir, who puts in a 2 and says, "Ukrainians are balling real hard this month. LSA."
Hey, thank you so much for the support. And the Ukrainians really are balling hard this month. And long live the Lee Spring Army. And thank you once again for the support, Elka, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, huge shout out to Mike Sontag for putting in a 2, who said, "Much appreciate the live stream tonight," and also huge shout out to M&M for putting in a 2 as well and supporting the channel. And huge shout out to you, Mike, for appreciating the stream as well, and also huge shout out to M&M as well. And with that, we're now moving on to our live chat questions, and of course, we're starting off with the Morse code decoders of the stream. Tonight we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Benu, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, and also a newcomer here to the Morse code, Her Royal Fluffiness, who said, "Morse code decoded says, a major victory for Ukraine and a serious defeat for the Russians in Kursk and Crimea and in the Don, LSA."
And that's the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate y'all for getting that correct. It's pretty impressive that y'all did, actually. I cannot believe that y'all have gotten that correct on the 911th day of the war. Mr. President, there's been a second 9/11. But beyond that, I gotta say, thank y'all once again for getting that correct. Really, really impressive stuff. And with that, we're about to be moving on into the live chats. But as many of y'all have noticed, we have started to go overtime by about 3 to 4 minutes. And so we are going to be addressing 3 live chat questions. Actually, crazily enough, because of all of the super chatters tonight, we actually ended up addressing a great deal of live chats already. We don't really have that many left in the spreadsheet, but we will be addressing 3 before we round out tonight's stream. And so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to JMP Traveler, who says that Ukraine's Independence Day is August the 24th. That's tomorrow, that is. And they said, "Is there a better day to bring down the bridge?"
Oh, no, I think any day is a good day, and that would probably be one of the best days because of the holiday. But I think it's the 24th over there right now, and so we will have to see if the bridge gets blown up here within the next few hours. And so with that, thank you so much once again for asking a really good question. That's actually a very interesting one, as a matter of fact. And I did not know that their Independence Day was tomorrow. That was something new to me. But with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one right here goes to You're Taking My Life, who says, is it legal for Russian civilians to video and post military convoy locations like they've been doing, or are they just trying to help out those Ukrainians?
It's not necessarily illegal, especially if they're not like geolocating and like contacting the enemy, at least in the Russians' eyes, and forwarding that information to them. It's not illegal technically. But if they're like directly like communicating with the Ukrainians and they're sending them like exact coordinates and stuff, it would be illegal. So there's kind of a bit of a gray area there. And if the Russians really want to, considering that laws don't really mean anything in Russia, they could arrest them anyways if it just rubs them the wrong way and say that they were aiding and abetting the enemy, which is treason. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least from what I would understand. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Kindred, who said, Enforcer, how much more of an advance will need to occur before the Russians start using chemical and low-yield nuclear weapons? And any thoughts?
I would have to say I don't really know if the Russians would use a nuclear weapon on the Ukrainians in Kursk, because Putin seems to be completely acting like Kursk isn't happening. Like in his addresses, he's of course mentioning that something is happening in Kursk, but he downplays it massively. And I don't think they would use a tactical nuke against him, because it would be massively upplaying what's going on. And not only that, a lot of Russian civilians would be called in the blast. Also, a lot of Russians would get killed if chemical weapons were used as well. And the usage of either of those would be showing that the Russians are on the back foot so badly and they're losing so horrifically that the only way that they can actually win is to completely change the way the war is being fought and start to use weapons of mass destruction and weapons that have been banned in warfare for over 100 years to try and offset the massive amount of loss that they're taking at the moment. So I would have to say they probably would not, but if the Ukrainians somehow took the entirety of the Kursk and Belgorod Oblast and started to drive up into Oriel, I think at that point we probably would see that they would start to use tactical nuclear weapons, at least in my opinion, but I could be wrong with that. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank each and every single one of y'all once again for watching. It has been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to run this stream for 67,000 people tonight with a peak viewership of 9.6 thousand people. I thank you all so much once again for watching. If y'all did enjoy and you were new to this channel, please make sure to subscribe, make sure to like, make sure to comment. Make sure to tell all of your friends and family about this thing, because we love to do it, and we would love to have your friends and family join us on this stream, along with yourselves. And so with that, I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And once again, folks, thank you all for another great stream tonight. We'll see you all tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern on the next Nightly War News stream, and also maybe midday tomorrow as well for the short war summary, if there's enough news to cover, that is. But with that, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava. Thank you all for watching, and get some rest, and good night.
Yes. The Lee Spring Army sends its regards